What's going on here? Can't you see we're having a meeting?
Do you have a legendary hero?
No, but what about it?
Give him 777 draws. +5 legendary heroes.
We're starting off the list with Hotel Monte Vista in Flagstaff, Arizona. There is some disturbing stuff going on at this place. At least that's what I've read. This place is teeming with former guests who checked into the hotel and never left, having met gruesome ends. Their spirits are now lingering within the establishment. One ghost, or in this case a pair of ghosts, are two women who were thrown from the 3rd floor back in the day and now spend their time as ghosts attempting to strangle male guests in their sleep. One long-term guest in the early 80s had a strange hobby of hanging meat from the chandelier in his room. One day he was found dead in his room. That room is 220, and guests and staff report strange activity going on in the room. Some staff just veer clear of it completely. The TV is known to turn on its own. This even continued after the TV was replaced, and some report the feeling of being touched by a cold, unseen hand. Number 9, the Hotel del Salto. This Colombian hotel was first erected in 1923 and has quite the reputation. That's why it has its dark nickname, which I can't really say the name of here, but suffice to say, a good number of people have died here. This place is absolutely gorgeous, overlooking the Tequendama waterfalls, but legend has it that in order to prevent being captured by Spanish conquistadors, the natives of the area would jump from these very cliffs. During the hotel's operation, a good number of people took their lives there or would fall by mistake, and this picturesque building became steeped in sadness and despair. The building still stands today, now having been transformed into a museum, but some still say not to go near the property at night, as countless lost souls still roam the grounds. At number 8, we have the Hotel del Coronado. This beautiful San Diego hotel is known to have had some pretty famous guests like President Ronald Reagan and Katharine Hepburn, just to name a couple. But there's also one ghost who checked in and has never left. Her name is Kate Morgan, and she's been haunting the hotel since her death in 1892. Kate Morgan had checked into the hotel and spent a few days there before taking her own life. She'd had stomach cancer and was waiting for her brother, who was a doctor, to arrive and assist her with her illness, but he didn't show up, and she hadn't received any letters. Her spirit is said to roam the property to this day, still waiting for her brother to finally arrive, especially on the 3rd floor. Her room is frequently requested by paranormal enthusiasts. There's another ghost supposedly said to haunt the hotel though, an actress by the name of Isadore Rush, who drowned by the beach in 1904. Staff have reported seeing the lights turn on and off in her room that she'd been staying in, even when the room is empty. Course. Next, we have the Mermaid Inn in East Sussex. This historical building was built at some time in the 12th or 13th centuries. With a building that old, it's no surprise people say it's haunted. Gotta say, it'd be pretty incredible to stay in a place like this. This place has quite the history. It was originally frequented mostly by medieval sailors. From 1420 to 1770, it was a bar and an inn which was frequently visited by the Hawkhurst Gang, a group of privateers who terrorized the area. The Mermaid Inn saw a number of deaths at the hands of these criminals over the years, some of which had been attempting to snitch on them. One of the leaders, Thomas Kingsmill, who was executed in 1749 for his crimes, is said to haunt the inn till this very day. The inn was eventually reopened in 1993, and guests have reported seeing a ghostly figure of a woman in white standing at the front of their bed when they wake up. There's also the spirit of a maid who died at the hands of a smuggler in room 5, which has been reportedly haunted well before the modern era. And of course, you have Thomas Kingsmill himself, who supposedly haunts a rocking chair in room 17. At number 6, we have the Mizpah Hotel in Nevada. This hotel opened in 1904 and was one of the first luxury hotels built in the state. It's a really nice looking hotel with Victorian era decor. I imagine it looks almost exactly as it did in the 1900s. As luxurious as this place is though, there's a dark piece of history that still lingers within the walls of the building to this day, and that is the death of a guest whose name has been lost to time but is known simply as the Red Lady. The Red Lady was believed to have lived at the hotel, providing a specific service for male clientele. The oldest trade in the world. The story goes that one of her clients saw her with another man and in a fit of jealous rage took her life. In some versions of the tale, she was strangled, in others she fell to her death from the 5th floor. But no matter what version you hear, it all ends the same way, with her spirit lingering within the hotel. Men will sometimes hear her disembodied voice whispering sweet things in their ears. Some have reported finding a pearl from her broken necklace under their pillows. You know what? That doesn't sound bad, actually. I'll take a pearl and a seductive whisper. Why not? Number 5, the Omni Grove Park Inn. You can find this lovely historic hotel in Asheville, North Carolina. For years, however, guests and staff alike have reported feeling the presence of a spirit simply known as the Pink Lady. The Pink Lady was a former guest at the hotel who unfortunately never left. She's often described simply as a pinkish, smoky haze, but will sometimes take on the form of a young woman in a pink ball gown. The story goes that the woman was the mistress of a married man and was staying in room 545, the room she's said to still haunt to this very day. She met her end falling from the 5th floor balcony to the 3rd. In some stories she was thrown, in others she jumped herself, but the Pink Lady sounds like a pretty fun ghost, to be honest. Some report their room being rearranged at night, lights turning on and off by themselves, and some have even woken up in the middle of the night with their feet being tickled. Never heard of a ghost doing that before, but I appreciate the creativity. Next up is the Emily Morgan Hotel in San Antonio, Texas. It's pretty obvious why this hotel is so supposedly haunted. From 1924 to 1976, the building was a hospital, complete with a morgue and crematorium. It didn't become a hotel until 1984. Staff and guests have reported all sorts of strange phenomena going on here. You have your more standard ghost stuff, of course. Maids will clean a room only to come out of the bathroom to see pillows tossed onto the floor, doors opening and closing on their own. I'm sure people hear things. Sometimes the elevators will randomly stop at various floors for no reason. Some guests have said they've heard the phone in their room ring and then they've gone to pick it up. There's no one on the other end of the line. One story goes that a guest had returned to her room after dinner to find that her bathtub had been filled with blue water. Now that could be an outright lie, or a staff member just went into her room and had a bath while she was out. But there are a lot of other strange things that go on here. The creepiest reports are those related to the lingering spirits who met their end as hospital patients. Some claim to hear the sound of a hospital cart being wheeled down the hallway. The smell of antiseptic often wafts throughout the 14th floor, especially. There are also shadowy figures said to move across the walls with no visible source. Number 3, the Ancient Ram Inn. Now, unfortunately, you can't actually stay in this place now. The owner uses it as their home. Man, I'd love to get a room here. The place was built all the way back in 1145. That probably isn't super exciting for the Europeans in the audience or like anyone really outside of North America, but I don't think I've ever stepped foot in a place that old. Anyway, you can only imagine how much history surrounds this building. This place was actually built on the grounds of a 5,000-year-old pagan burial site. Reports of strange occurrences, including ghostly apparitions and disembodied voices, have been reported, and as to what spirit or spirits these voices belong to, one of the most famous legends involves a witch who was supposedly burned at the stake on the property at some point in the 1500s. There are also legends of a number of tragic events, such as human sacrifices that are said to have taken place within its walls. And number 2, we have, of course, the Cecil Hotel. The Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles has a notorious history marked by a series of incredibly grim events. It's become quite infamous for its association with criminal activity and unsettling paranormal occurrences. The 1940s saw the Cecil being linked to several unalivings, leading to its pretty blunt nickname. The hotel was also the temporary residence of the infamous Richard Ramirez during his horrific spree. One of the most well-known incidents in modern times was, of course, the case of Elisa Lam in 2013. Her mysterious death and that eerie elevator surveillance footage captured attention from everyone across the internet. And for all these reasons and more, many have claimed the building to be incredibly haunted. Reports of strange noises and ghostly sightings have been being claimed for decades. And lastly, we have the Langham Hotel in London, England, said to be one of the most haunted hotels in the country. The hotel was built in 1865, so a lot of guests have stayed at this place over the years, some of which have never left. There are said to be 5 primary ghosts that haunt this building. Some people apparently hear a baby crying at night. Well, I mean, I guess babies might stay at the hotel, but if it's just a disembodied baby voice, that's creepy. One primary ghost is that of a German prince who fell from his upper story window. Staff have reported seeing his ghostly figure moving through walls. His presence is also always accompanied by a drop in temperature. Room 333 is supposedly the most haunted room. One man, a BBC newscaster, woke up to see the ghostly figure of a man in Victoria-era evening wear. The figure hovered in the air. It had no legs. Classic ghost kind of look. The figure started floating towards the man with its arms out, as if it was going to grab him. In 2014, several English national team cricket players left the hotel in the middle of the night because of supposed paranormal activity going on in their rooms. They reported sudden, unexplained heat, their bathroom taps turned on by themselves, and they just had this uneasy feeling of a strange presence lurking in their rooms.
Starting us off at number 10 is Elms Hotel and Spa. Located in Missouri, some believe this hotel might just be the most haunted in the entire state. Originally built in 1888, just 10 years after its construction, the Elms Hotel was destroyed by a fire. It was a tragic event, but luckily no one lost their lives. But what's mysterious is that in 1910, the hotel went up in flames once more. Again, no one lost their lives, but this time, passersby noticed something. It appeared as though a spirit was walking around the embers, and rumors began circulating that somehow the mysterious entity had lit the flames. But just who exactly is this spooky arson demon, and why did they burn down the hotel? More importantly, if it was them, what made them stop? And it's not just fire maniac ghosts that haunt these halls. Another commonly seen apparition is that of a grieving woman who wanders the halls looking for her little one. But make no mistake, though she may be grieving, she is an angry entity. She'll pull at their hair or throw objects across the room while they are asleep to try and get your attention. Maybe she believes the guests are who took her little one from her, or maybe she is just angry to have visitors there. But either way, if I were you, I would not stay the night if you're looking for a peaceful sleep. Coming in at number 9, the Biltmore Hotel. Back in 1929, New York gangster Thomas Fatty Walsh was staying in the Everglades suite on the 13th floor of the Biltmore Hotel in Florida. Apparently, Fatty routinely stayed here and used the suite as a speakeasy and casino for him and his friends. However, after a heated argument over gambling debts, Fatty was shot by fellow mobster Edward Wilson and died right on the scene, and it appears he has never left. Once a player, still a player, the New York gangster is notorious for appearing only to women who he deems attractive and tricks them into visiting him on the 13th floor. One woman recounted her stay with her husband and said while in the elevator, all of a sudden, the doors opened on the 13th floor, despite that neither of them had requested that floor. They waited a moment and the doors wouldn't close, so the woman stepped out to see what was going on. As soon as she did, the doors slammed behind her on the elevator and it continued its journey to the lobby. The husband, worried for his wife, tried to reach the 13th floor but was unable, so he went back to their suite only to find his wife beside herself and outright spooked. She said when the doors shut behind her, she heard a maniacal laugh and the smell of cigar smoke. On top of Fatty's ghost, other entities are routinely seen walking through the walls, slamming doors, or watching you sleep. So it's a no for me. Coming in at number 8 is Hawthorne Hotel. While this entire Salem hotel is said to be haunted by several different entities, the rooms you really need to be afraid of are 612 and 325. Room 612 and the 6th floor in general is where the apparition of a woman is often seen roaming the halls, who many believe is the ghost of Bridget Bishop, the first woman executed during the witch trials. Accused of bewitching 5 other women, she died in 1692 and remains haunting the property, seeking revenge for her life taken too soon. Those that stay in this room report a strong smell of apples, which most think has to do with the fact that she owned an apple orchard on the land where the hotel was built in 1925. But of course, it is her frightening apparition that stares at you while you sleep that is really unsettling. unsettling. As for room 325, it's believed the entities that haunt this room may have been past guests. No one is quite sure why they are there, but these entities are definitely frightening. Guests report lights turning on and off with no explanation, as well as water faucets doing the same within the room. While lying on the bed, guests have reported experiencing an extreme level of cold, with many reporting being grabbed or tugged at while trying to fall asleep. Plus, at night, it's said the screams and cries of the past guests can be heard echoing in the room. But what's strange is it never seems to occur anywhere else in the building. Coming in at number 7, Fort Garry Hotel. Built in 1903, since its doors opened to the public, many famous figures have stayed overnight, including Queen Elizabeth II, King George VI, Louis Armstrong, even Liberace. But don't let the star-studded guest list ease your suspicions. This place is straight up frightening, especially room 202, where it said a woman took her own life by hanging in the closet. Those that have dared to stay in the haunted room claim they saw blood drip down the walls and that a terrifying woman wearing a cloak would appear out of nowhere, often hovering over the foot of the bed while you sleep at night. What's even scarier is that some say she will crawl into the bed with you and that you can feel her cold, ghostly frame wrap around you. But it's not just the room where you might run into the spooky ghoul. She's known to haunt the hotel lounge as well, where staff and guests alike claim to hear loud cries coming from the same corner. I mean, unless you're looking to literally cuddle up with a ghost, I would steer clear of this one. Coming in at number 6, the Fairmont Hotel. While many of us know Banff for the gorgeous, picturesque Rocky Mountains, the famous Fairmont Hotel also has a dark secret. Room 873. As the story goes, years and years ago, an entire family was killed in this very room. After a long investigation, the room was refurbished and went back into the usual cycle. But soon the hotel staff were receiving many disturbances about the room that sent their blood running cold. Guests said they would fall asleep only to be awoken by screams, and that when the lights turned off, bloody handprints would be found on the mirrors. Staff would rush to the room to investigate, but all seemed to have disappeared by the time they got there. Afraid of what lurked inside, the room was sealed shut and never to be entered again. And if you go there now, no trace of the room exists. There is only a long hallway where a door used to be, and if you knock along the wall, you'll hear a hollow noise where it's believed the room was once sealed up many years ago. But just because they've locked up this door doesn't mean the terrifying ghosts were trapped inside. It seems room 692 has taken over as the most haunted room in the joint, and the same kinds of frightening phenomena continue. And if that weren't enough, it's also reported the ghost of a bride is seen dancing in the ballroom. It said she tragically lost her life on her wedding day after tripping down the stairs, breaking her neck, and being set ablaze by nearby candles. Some guests claim to have witnessed her on fire walking through the halls, and who knows, she might just come and haunt you in room 692.
Afraid to open email attachments or make payments online because of cyber threats? Your computer runs slow and it keeps crashing when you have the most important work to do? If you haven't given System Mechanic a serious look, you're missing out on one of the most popular PC optimization tools available. If you aren't all that tech savvy with Windows PCs, feel free to skip this video. However, if you're ready to help your family experience faster startups, snappier performance, with fewer headaches and complaints, keep watching. Hi, I'm with Iolo, an American software company founded over 20 years ago with one purpose: to make PCs faster. Our System Mechanic software has won PC Magazine Editor's Choice 8 times in a row recently, and has helped millions of people just like you. What if you could instantly help your family fix annoying computer problems and avoid the hassle of doing it all by hand? Would that be something you would be interested in? We put together a free, in-depth online scan that you can use to quickly check your own PC right now. Go ahead and download it today by clicking the link above or below. If you haven't given System Mechanic a try, you're missing out on one of the key tools used by major repair centers to save time and easily fix problems. Or maybe you've been doing it all by hand, defragging drives, hunting down apps and services.
Coming in at number 5, the Empress Hotel. Located in Victoria, British Columbia, the Empress Hotel is a decadent building known to be visited by some of the most elite of our society. But don't be fooled by its gorgeous exterior and extravagant decor. It just might be one of the most haunted hotels in all of Canada. There are many ghost stories told about this hotel, like the construction worker who was working during the 1960s and came across a shadowy figure hanging from the chandelier, only to discover a staff member had taken their life in that very room room exactly 1 year prior. Guests also report an elderly woman in pajamas who'll knock at your door in the middle of the night asking for help finding her room, only to take you to the elevator and disappear right before your eyes. It's believed she was a ghost who haunted a room that has since been demolished due to the need for more elevators, hence her confusion and disappearance as soon as she steps foot into one. Others, like the building's architect and a young girl, haunt the building, but the most frightening spirit is the maid, Lizzie. Back in 1909, 1 year after the hotel's opening, Lizzie stepped out onto the hotel fire escape to say her rosary, as she did every night. But this time, unbeknownst to poor Lizzie, the contractor had disassembled the platform, and so Lizzie plummeted to her death from the 6th story. Guests who now stay anywhere on the 6th floor claim to have seen her walk through walls or hear her screams late at night, and believe she is out seeking revenge on the worker responsible for the end of her life. Coming in at number 4, Tubac Golf Resort and Spa. It's one thing to witness the sight of a ghost, but in my opinion, it's a whole other terror to be physically grabbed or moved by one. According to one hotel worker back in 2010, they ended up having to work late, so instead of going home, he just decided to stay the night in the Otero Ranch House. The ranch house had long been associated with ghostly apparitions and frightening tales, but the staff member was exhausted and it was the only room available, so he figured he would take his chances. When he got in, he decided to lay down on the couch and watch some TV for a bit before heading to bed, when suddenly he felt it move, and not just a little. According to the staff member, the entire couch lifted up off the floor, and with him in it, jerked several feet towards the TV. He was immediately freaked out, but before he could get up off the couch, the curtains that hung across the room from him lifted up and came down with a swoosh on top of him. Needless to say, he immediately bolted from the room and did not dare spend the rest of the night. Although he still works at the resort, he has never again stepped foot in the Otero Ranch and will choose sleeping in his car over ever staying a minute in the haunted room. Coming in at number 3, Hotel Provincial. Branded as one of the most haunted places in New Orleans, the Hotel Provincial is located in the infamously haunted French Quarter. Back in the day, there was a military hospital just down the street from the hotel, and one of the buildings used a medicinal herb garden for the hospital, which seems a little strange, but does make sense when you find out the kinds of spirits that haunt the halls. Today, the hotel consists of 5 buildings, and although ghosts are known to lurk in each, the most haunted building is believed to be number 5. Guests of building number 5 have reported seeing insane things, such as Confederate soldiers covered in blood, moaning from agonizing pain, who miraculously disappear once the lights turn on. Others have reported apparitions of surgeons in the halls, and maybe most disturbing is the amount of guests that have seen strange pools of blood appear on their bedding or the floor that disappear just as fast as they came into view. One guest even reported that as the elevator door opened on the hotel's 2nd floor, the hospital was entirely in view. So it seems as though the soldiers that died in the hospital down the street took a liking to the hotel and continued to haunt all the visitors who enter to this day. Coming in at number 2, Ottawa Jail Hostel. As you probably already figured out from the name, once upon a time this building was a jail. It opened its doors to the public in 1862 and quickly became the site of many public executions. On top of that, living conditions were harsh, with small, cold, and windowless cells that only had a small hole to allow for airflow. But things didn't start getting spooky until years later. After the building was converted into the hostel it is today, the parking lot was partially excavated to build a bridge, but to the construction workers' horror, the remains of 140 bodies were uncovered on the ground, and it's believed that all 140 bodies were prisoners who lost their life to execution. The most famous inmate was Patrick James Whelan, a man who up until his last breath pleaded he was not guilty of his convicted crime. What's worse is that he was told his body would be transported back to Montreal after his execution, but this promise was not kept, and they laid him to rest on the prison grounds. Angry and out for revenge, many guests say they have seen him or even been the victim of his wrath during their stay. One guest in particular, who made it very clear that she didn't even believe in ghosts prior to her stay, said at 1 o'clock in the morning she was woken by someone grabbing her arm and trying to pull her out of the bed. Her friend, who was across the room from her, woke when the girl screamed, "Let me go," into the darkness, and the two were both so frightened they couldn't fall back asleep.
one of the most prolific serial killers of all time. A national phenomenon. But why?
But there are a few missing people cases that honestly just don't seem to make sense. Why did they disappear? Were they taken by someone or something?
Somebody ought to be looking into this because there's a lot of missing people in the parks.
And last up in our #1 spot, La Pavilion Hotel. Just minutes away from the notorious French Quarter lies the luxurious Pavilion Hotel. But despite its lavish exterior, it is believed to be the home to over 100 spirits. And some paranormal investigators even believe the building sits on top of a portal to the other side. An interesting theory considering the building's less than ideal history. Although today the area is a tourist hotspot, back in the 19th century, the ground where La Pavilion sits was deemed completely inhospitable and incredibly dangerous. It was the frequent spot for foul deeds and late night killings, which is likely why so many spirits reside in the hotel's four walls. Among the most talked about are a couple seen dressed in beautiful clothing roaming around with googly eyes. The couple will enter an elevator, but then it never goes anywhere. Instead, the usual ping sound rings loudly and the doors open up again, revealing no one inside. Many also claim to have witnessed a young woman on the 9th floor reported to have died on the steps of the hotel, but the truly terrifying entity only reveals herself at night. One guest staying on the most notoriously haunted 9th floor said that in the middle of the night he was woken by a woman dressed in all black sitting at the foot of his bed. He was speechless and terrified and went to scream, but the entity leaned in, ran her icy cold fingers through his hair and said, "You belong to me. I'll never let you go." Needless to say, he never returned, and I do not blame him. If I ever saw that lady in my room, I would be running as fast as I could.
Starting off this countdown, we have room 333. The Langham Hotel is said to be one of the most haunted hotels in London, as it is haunted by more than 5 ghosts. The most active ghost is said to be that of a German prince. It's believed that he threw himself out of a window on an upper story room and passed away. Guests have seen his ghost on a number of occasions. He is known to move through walls and close doors. If you feel a sudden drop in temperature, it's said that's a sign that he is near. You also have the ghost of a man with a gaping wound on his face. But the most haunted area in the whole hotel is room 333. People who have stayed in this room have encountered a number of terrifying ghosts. The first sighting was made by a BBC newscaster. He was staying in the room when he woke up to see a fluorescent ball of light floating above him, which slowly transformed into a human figure. The apparition hovered in his room, and he was dressed in Victorian evening wear, but one of his legs was missing. He came towards the newscaster with his arms open and eyes wide, before disappearing into thin air. Another ghost that haunts this room is the ghost of a doctor who took the life of his wife on their honeymoon. This guy often appears wearing a cloak and often has blank staring eyes. And lastly, we have Emperor Napoleon III. Apparently he lived at the Langham during his last days in exile. And he's also made an appearance in room 333. In our 9th spot, we have the Hay Adams. Located in Washington, D.C., this hotel is said to be the most famous hotel in the capital. That's because a number of big hotshots have stayed there, like Obama. But the hotel has a pretty haunting past. In 1884, John Hay, who was President Abraham Lincoln's private secretary, and Henry Adams built their homes on the plot of land where the hotel was built upon. In 1885, Adams' wife, Marion Hooper Adams, ended up taking her life there. She had been battling a case of serious depression, triggered by the death of her father 10 months earlier. In 1927, after Adams passed away, the houses were destroyed and replaced with the hotel. But it didn't matter, because Marion's soul is attached to the land that she died on, so she now haunts the hotel. Guests and staff members have frequently reported hearing the sounds of someone crying. They believe that it is Marion weeping over her heartbreak and loss of father. In our 8th spot, we have the Ballygolly Castle, and I just absolutely love the name of this place, so I had to put it on today's list. Like Ballygolly, Ballygally, I don't care, it's funny. Anyways, this was a castle built in 1625 Ireland. Now, it has been transformed into a hotel. Turns out that years ago, the original owners, Lord James Shaw and his wife, Lady Isabella, lived in the castle. That was until Isabella's death. She either fell, jumped, or was pushed to her death from the top of the castle. To this day, her ghost still haunts her old home. She has been seen wandering around the castle, knocking on doors, and on multiple occasions can be heard weeping from her tower. Moving on to number 7, we have room 873. Located in the luxury mountain resort Banff Springs Hotel, room 873 is so haunted that they had to permanently seal it up, hoping that it would seal away the evil with it. According to a number of legends, decades ago a family was killed in room 873. In 1928, a married couple and their daughter checked into the hotel, but they never checked out. During one night, the father ended up taking the lives of his wife and daughter before taking his own life. No one knows why he did this. Soon after, the room was refurbished and booked out to visitors. But weird things started happening in that room. Guests would wake up in the middle of the night to sounds of screaming in their room. When they would flip on the lights, they would see bloody handprints on the mirror inside the room. Obviously, they would freak the hell out and run to the front desk, but when the staff went to the room to investigate the prints, they would be gone. It was happening so frequently that they decided to board up the room. In fact, if you go to the hotel today, there are rooms ending in 7-3 on each floor, except on the 8th floor. In the spot where it should be, you can tell that a room has been boarded up. In our 6th spot today, we have Lizzie Borden House. Turns out that the infamous Lizzie Borden House, where she allegedly killed her parents, is now a fun little bed and breakfast. But a haunted fun little bed and breakfast. So story goes that back in 1892, both of Lizzie's parents were found dead. After investigating the scene, Lizzie was the only person who seemed guilty, so she was blamed for their murder. While staying there, guests have reported seeing doors open and close on their own. Also, late at night, apparently Lizzie can be heard laughing at the top of the stairs. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Omni Grove Park Inn. Back in the 1920s, while staying at the Omni Grove Park Inn in North Carolina, a young woman was either pushed or jumped to her death from her hotel room 545. To this day, her presence still wanders the walls of the hotel. Some guests have felt her presence, others have seen a strange pink mist form around them, and some have actually seen this ghostly woman herself. She appears in a flowy pink gown, hence why people just call her the Pink Lady. The people most sensitive to seeing her are young children. A number of children have seen her and been like, "Mommy, who's that lady in the pink dress?" Meanwhile, no one's there. How freaky.
Please forgive me, for I have sinned. I promise to give the players Lucky and Anami for free.
Coming in at number 4, we have the Ostasaga Resort. Located in New York, this resort has quite the fair share of history. When it was first erected, it was actually a school for girls, and to this day, these little girlies still haunt the area. Apparently, while on the 3rd floor hallway, you'll be able to hear a bunch of them giggling and whispering. In fact, Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters went to investigate this place a couple years ago, and when doing so, they captured the presence of a bunch of shadowy figures, ghostly whisperings, and other paranormal activity. If you want to check out the place today, go to the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th floors. That's where all the spooky stuff is said to happen. In our 3rd spot today, we have La Posada de Santa Fe. This resort and spa hotel is anything but relaxing. Turns out that it is haunted by a German woman named Julia Stab. Oh my god, her last name is Stab. It's probably like Stob. It definitely is because it's German, but anyway, it makes it spookier. Before it was a resort, it was her mansion. It was built by her husband in 1882. A couple years later, Julia fell into a really bad depression. Her 8th child ended up passing away shortly after birth, and so Julia locked herself in her room. She didn't leave her room until 1896. When she passed away, her soul latched onto the house. To this day, she still wanders around the halls. Most frequently, she will appear in Suite 100. It's now a guest suite, but it used to be her bedroom. In fact, Julia loved to take baths, so people staying in the suite often hear the water running in the middle of the night. Moving on to number 2, we have the Fairmount Royal York Hotel. Turns out that there's a haunted hotel in my hometown and I didn't even know it. Toronto's Royal York Hotel is nearly 100 years old. Construction of it finished in 1929, and over the years a number of members of royalty, celebrities, and millionaires and ghosts have stayed at this hotel. Seems to be a nice luxury hotel, minus the fact that it's completely haunted. One famous ghost is the man dressed in a purple coat that wanders around the 8th floor. There's also ghosts of children haunting the halls. One guest told the concierge that they heard children running up and down the halls on the first night that they checked in, but they saw no children. When they looked through the peephole the next night, they saw a gray-haired man with a purple waistcoat. They initially thought that it was a hotel staff member, but when they opened the door, the man disappeared into thin air. The hotel also has a crystal ballroom that is also haunted. Guests frequently hear noises and music within the ballroom, even after it's been closed. And in our number 1 spot today, we have room B340. Queen Mary Hotel is said to be one of the most haunted hotels in America. There are a number of ghosts that haunt this hotel, from Jackie, the little girl who haunts the first-class pool, to a man named John Petter who was crushed by a watertight door, to 2nd Senior Officer William Eric Stark, who accidentally drank cleaning fluid instead of gin, and one of the cooks who was baked alive by his own staff during World War II. So yeah, a lot of dark things have happened on this ship turned hotel. Now, there is one room that you never ever want to visit, and that's room B340. It's the site of a huge tragedy. So back in the 60s, the ship was used for transatlantic cruises. Well, while on this cruise, a man went crazy and took the lives of 2 women in this room. When his crimes were discovered, he was locked in the room until they could dock the ship and deal with him. The door was locked from the outside, and a guard was positioned outside the room so the killer couldn't escape. At one point, the guard heard the man pounding on the door saying that someone was in the room with him and was trying to kill him. Obviously, the guard was like, I ain't no idiot, I'm not falling for that, so he never opened the door. He thought this guy was just trying to get him to open the door so he could escape. Here's where it gets weird. Shortly after, the guard heard nothing coming from the room, so he thought that the man finally settled down and went to bed. The next day, the ship arrived in New York, and the NYPD boarded the ship to arrest this man. But when he opened the door, they found the man's body parts scattered across the room. His limbs had been ripped off and were all over the place. There's no way that he could have done this to himself. So what happened in there? Was there actually someone in that room with him? If so, how did they get in and then out? A number of guests who have stayed in that room have reported eerie things happening to them in the middle of the night, like flickering lights, knocking, apparitions, and the water turning on and off by itself.
Kicking off the countdown at the number 10, we have the room at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. The glamorous hotel opened in 1927 right at the center of Hollywood and has a long history of celebrities staying there. It is often used for movie premiere after parties and even hosted the very first Oscars. It's a huge spot for tourists, but one room in particular is known to be haunted. Room 1200. People have reported seeing the legendary star Marilyn Monroe walk through the halls of that room. Well, the hall's the room, you know, the whole living situation. She was staying there during her rise to fame. It's been said that she shot her first ever ad at the Roosevelt pool, and she still hangs around the pool to this day. Many guests said they have seen her in the room's mirror, and maintenance workers said they've seen her blue dress moving through the halls. If you're gonna be haunted by a ghost, it might as well be Marilyn Monroe, am I right? Up next at number 9 is the Red Lion Inn, located in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. The inn has been around since 1773, and throughout the years it has been a favorite spot for paranormal investigators and mediums. The hotel is filled with a haunting past, and reports say that the 4th floor has a lot of sightings. The ghost of a young girl carrying flowers and a man with a top hat are the 2 most frequent sightings, but one room in particular has the most activity. It's on the 3rd floor, and it's room 301. A guest reported that they woke up feeling like someone was standing over their bed and heard unexplained knocks and voices throughout their stay. Snagging the number 8 spot on our countdown is the Queen Anne in San Francisco. The Now Hotel was once a school for girls back in 1890, run by the headmistress named Miss Mary Lake. Over the years, the school converted to a hotel, and it's been said that Miss Mary Lake will look after the guests who stay in her former office, room 410. She's not a ghost that will terrorize people like in horror movies. She looks after her guests, like she once did with her students many generations ago. Guests have reported that their clothes were unpacked when they came back to the rooms, and they woke up in the middle of the night to find out that their blankets had been neatly tucked underneath them. I can't tell if this is creepy or comforting. I kind of like the idea of a ghost nanny who just like takes care of you. Like, creepy nanny, please tuck me in. I don't know why it was Italian for that. Cruising into the number 7 spot is the Omni Groove Park in Asheville, North Carolina. Back in the 1920s, news broke that a woman either jumped or got pushed to her death from the 5th floor balcony. A century later, employees and guests say that the room she was in, room 545, is still haunted by her presence. Her case was never solved, which might be part of the reason why she still makes herself known. They refer to her as the Lady in Pink because she is often seen in a pink dress or leaves behind a pink mist. Apparently, young children are the ones who spot her the most, so if you really want to catch a glimpse of her, grab your kids and make them do the work. Be like, hey Johnny, find this ghost for me. Yeah, ghost finding kid. Put them on a leash like they're a ghost town and they just like crawl around like is that the noise that kids make? I don't know what noise kids make. In at the number 6 is the Malaga Inn, located in Mobile, Alabama. It's considered one of the most haunted hotels in Alabama and still has the boutique style that it did when it was built in 1862. The property is historic in the Deep South and is still a memory of the Civil War era. It has 39 rooms, Victorian furnishings and decor, and a beautiful outdoor courtyard. When it was built, the 2 townhouses were constructed by 2 in-laws as wedding gifts for their 2 sisters in the family. Guests claim that the sisters never left the home and that they often spot a ghostly lady figure in a white dress in room 007. She was recently spotted pacing on the balcony. Other guest reports say that their lights turn on and off by themselves, furniture moves on its own, and even a swinging chandelier. The only time a swinging chandelier is cool is when you're swinging from it with a bottle of champagne in one hand, you're like popping it and blowing it at everyone, you're like, I'm rich, you can do whatever I want. That's when it's cool. We're halfway through at number 5.
Hey. Yes. No!
And we have La Posada, which is located in Santa Fe. It's known for being a hotel now, but before it was renovated, it was actually the home of a German lady named Julia Stab. The mansion was built for her by her husband in 1882, and after her 8th child died shortly after birth, she fell into a deep depression. Reports say she hid in her room, was never seen in the flesh again after 1896, her death becoming a huge mystery. So now that it's a hotel, guests have said they've seen her staying in room 100, which was her former bedroom. It can be a haunting experience if you decide to stay there. It's been said that Julia used to love baths, and guests staying in room 100 would hear running water in the middle of the night and their water would turn on and off on its own. Alright guys, we're at number 4 with the Concords Colonial Inn. If you walk down the hallways of this hotel, you might feel a chill running up your spine because it's known for being historically haunted by its past. It was built in Concord, Massachusetts back in the Revolutionary War. One of the rooms in the hotel is known for being haunted, room 24, because it was used as an operation room for wounded soldiers back in the 1770s. Caretakers operated on the wounded soldiers and many of them didn't survive and passed away in that very room. Many guests have dared to spend the night there, and they say they see floating orbs, hear haunting voices, and even saw the ghost of a nurse walking around the room. Would you guys like to stay in this room? For me, that's a no. In our 3rd spot is the Battery Carriage Inn. The hotel in Charleston, South Carolina is known for being the most romantic bed and breakfast, but also the most haunted. How do those two blend together? I'm not exactly sure. The hotel is said to have been haunted for many years, and the website openly brags about it. Apparently, there are 3 rooms in the hotel that are haunted. Room 3, Room 8, and Room 10. Room 10 is known for a headless torso, Room 3 has a variety of different ghost sightings, and Room 8 always has a man apparition. The hotel was built in the 1840s and still lives on as one of the most popular tourist spots to this day. Taking over the number 2 spot is the Crescent Hotel and Spa. The Arkansas Hotel has been given the title for being America's most haunted hotel, with claims that it has a portal to the other side, if you know what I mean. It opens up a door to the dead. Over the years, many guests have reported ghost sightings and paranormal activity, a fact that is known by the 2 owners who bought it back in 1997. They ended up hiring certified mediums to do a reading on the building, and they found out that the hotel was a portal to the other side, a dimension that holds the spirits of the dead. But why this hotel? Because it was once a hospital back in 1937, when a doctor named Norman Baker treated cancer patients despite his lack of training. As a result, many of the people died, and apparently you can stay in the room that was once a morgue if you want to have the worst night of your life. Winning the number 1 spot on our list is the Stanley Hotel. It is number 1 because it is the most spirit hotel in America, and it was the inspiration for the Stephen King movie The Shining after the famous author stayed there for one night. It was built back in 1909, but to this day guests report that they see spirits and hear untraceable piano music, and they also hear manic laughs and empty spaces, and it's been said that the spirits are all employees and guests who were once at the hotel from many years ago. Room 217 is is known for being the most haunted, and it's the one that Stephen King and his wife stayed in back in 1974, which inspired the novel which made the iconic movie many years later.
Coming at number 10 now, we have the Shadow Men. This one comes from Reddit user Mithrin. He said he used to work in his aunt and uncle's hotel in a Scottish village. One night while sleeping in the staff quarters, he was woken up from a loud banging noise in the corridor. He angrily got up, ready to tell people to shut up so he'd get back to sleep, but the corridor was empty. He walked to the end of the corridor to see if there was anything coming up the stairs from below, and that's when he saw it. He said a figure was stomping up the stairs. He said it looked like a shadow person, but solid. There were no features on the face or clothes on its body. It looked like someone wearing a black morph suit if you could see right through them. He ran back to his room terrified and could hear the banging for hours. The next morning, nobody else in the hotel said they heard anything, and he kept the secret of the Shadow Man to himself. Moving on to number 9 now, we have children's clothes. This one comes from Reddit user Loco Mojo. They said that one night when they were working in a hotel, a man came down to the lobby area and began wandering around. He was acting very strange. He was talking to himself as he sat down at a breakfast table before standing up and switching chairs around the table every few minutes. When they asked if he needed help, he would just jerk a little bit and mumble that he didn't need anything. After a few hours of this, he went back to his room and then returned to say he had turned the heater on, which had left him short of breath, and he needed an ambulance. Then the fire alarms went off. When the fire crew came back down from the room, they kept asking if the man was alone. They said, yes, he came here alone, he's staying there alone. After the fire crew left, they went to go and look in the man's room. The sight shocked them. He had rearranged all of the furniture, put the TV in the bathroom, and had put his trash can in the middle of the room on the bed and had set it on fire. Perhaps the most disturbing thing of all was that even though he said he was alone, there were small children's clothes spread all over the room. Coming at number 8 now, we have the elevator. This is a short but scary one that I think everyone can appreciate. It comes from Reddit user The Dino Man Show. They said that one night they visited a hotel and needed to use the elevator. They got in, they went up to the 4th floor, and the doors opened. There stood a group of people waiting for the elevator, but they made no attempt to get in, even though he was the only one in there. After a few seconds, the automatic doors closed, and just before they closed, when there was only a slight crack left, he heard one of the people outside say, "Why is the lift so full of people?" That's the point where I would just start mashing the open doors button. At number 7 now, we have the woman in grey. This one comes from Reddit user Army of Wombles. He said that he once worked as a waiter in an old hotel in Scotland. They were expecting special guests, 2 old women who were friends of the owner, although as a fairly new waiter himself, he hadn't met them yet. Another waiter mentioned they had arrived and told him to go and put some wine in their room as they were being helped out of the car. So he picked a bottle up, he opened it, he got 2 glasses and a tray and went over to the room. On the way, he heard some shuffling. He'd been told the stories about how the place was haunted by the ghost of a woman in grey who had hung herself. Then, as he turned the corner, right in front of him, he saw a woman in very old-fashioned clothes walking away from him with no head. What? Now it turns out that it was actually one of the 2 old women who was arriving as a guest. She had osteoporosis, which caused her head to be below her shoulders. Still a terrifying sight nonetheless. Coming at number 6 now, we have the footprints. This one is really mysterious. It comes from Reddit user Fluxy Wild. They said they were working in a motel when they were about 17 or 18. They were at the front desk but was asked by the housekeeping guy to come up and check something out in one of the rooms that was being cleaned. He got up there to see the housekeeping guy standing in the middle of the room just pointing at the ceiling. There was a set of bare footprints on the ceiling which was at least 10 feet high. Not a shoe print, a bare footprint. It was only in the middle of the ceiling too. They figured there was no way someone could just jump 10 feet upside down. There was also a single bullet left on the bed. What's going on with that story? Do we even want to know? Moving on to number 5 now, we have the cold bathroom. This one comes from Reddit user Scumbag760. Nice name. He used to work in security at a hotel in California. Every night he got a sheet showing which rooms were empty that night. It was his job to go through all the rooms and make sure the lights were off and the windows were secure. One night he went into a room and found all of the lights were on. He began to turn them off. After turning the bathroom light off, he noticed the room was freezing cold. He reached into the bathroom to turn the thermostat up when suddenly the door slammed. He ran out of the room and tried to close the door behind him, but the deadbolt pushed its itself out of the lock and slammed into the door frame. When he came back, the door was shut. He moved it around to see if it would close, but it wouldn't. He even tried slamming the door himself, but it was too light to even shut because it caught a lot of air. He said that was the last night he ever went into that room. At number 4 now, we have the dragging. This one comes from Reddit user Blue Pig. He was staying in a hotel one night while traveling for work. It was one that he had used quite a lot before. Nothing strange had ever really happened. One day, he crashed into bed exhausted and tried to get some sleep as he had to be up quite early in the morning. He couldn't seem to sleep though. There was just this noise, a constant shuffling sound coming from above. It sounded like someone was dragging a table or a chair across the floor, almost as if they were rearranging furniture. This continued almost constantly for 2 hours. He called the front desk to complain. They sent someone to the room above to check, but there was nobody there. The room was totally empty. When he tried to get back to sleep a little while later, the noise just started again. How creepy is that? Anyone got a good theory? Coming at number 3 now, we have the partier. This one comes from Reddit, where a guy said he used to work front desk at a Marriott hotel. One night during the winter season, the whole hotel was booked out by a high school who were going on ski trips to nearby resorts. It was party central, apparently. Total chaos. He said people would ride furniture down the water slide, punch holes in the wall to connect their rooms, and cut open their mattresses to hide drugs and alcohol. One night, a male student overdosed and was found in the hallway. He was unconscious on the floor when the paramedics arrived. He had no pulse and had to be defibrillated back to life. He was taken to the hospital for a few hours, but was somehow allowed to leave and return to the party, where he shouted, "Who's ready for shots?" and then just continued to party. He literally died and then returned to a hotel party. Next up at number 2 now, we have the clone. This is a very creepy one. It comes from Reddit user Infinity Girl. She told a story about her friends that she refers to as E and M. I'm going to call them Ellen and Mary for this story. Ellen was her college roommate who worked as the night manager for a newly built hotel. She brought Ellen coffee one night like normal, but found her sitting at the front desk shaking her head in confusion. Ellen said she had just checked in what she could only describe as the doppelganger of their other roommate, Mary. Ellen said she was exactly like Mary and that she tried to show her a picture of Mary on her phone. This woman wasn't even interested. They put it down to coincidence and just sat and drank their coffee. At 2:30 a.m. she pulled into a garage and looked at her phone to see a series of texts from Ellen to her and Mary at 2:17 saying, "Stop, not funny, you guys suck, and what the hell?" She was confused and so she called her back. Ellen sounded hysterical on the phone and said that she saw her and Mary wearing the exact same clothes as earlier, standing in the main hallway of the hotel, just staring at her. Ellen told them to stop joking around. The front desk phone rang, and by the time she had turned to answer it, they had gone. Ellen eventually calmed down and said she didn't tell her the freakiest part of the story. When she got home that night, the kitchen clock was stuck at 2:17 a.m. and right next to it was a picture of her and Mary smiling that she had developed earlier that afternoon. Can you explain these creepy clones? Perhaps it's a glitch in the Matrix? Perhaps we will never know. And finally, number 1 now, we have room number 8. This one comes from Reddit user Vicerine. She said that before she was born, her parents decided to move out to the coast and open a nice hotel. Before they opened for guests, her mum and dad decided to clean all of the rooms. One day, her mum was in room number 8 by herself, doing some vacuuming, when the whole carpet just started rippling, shall we say. And I don't just mean colors or patterns. Her mum said the entire carpet rippled in a constant fluid wave type motion, lifting all of the furniture and herself up and down off the floor for about 10 seconds. Her dad came running in when he heard the screams. Her mum said they were selling before the place even opened, but her dad managed to convince her otherwise. She refused to ever step into room 8 ever again though.
Starting off at number 10 is the Stone Line Inn in Oklahoma. This inn was originally built as a Victorian mansion in 1907 for F.E. Houghton, but it was also used as a funeral home for an 8-year period when the Houghton family struggled financially. The embalming table from that time is still on display at what is now a bed and breakfast. Possibly as a result of the death that was within it previously, guests have reported strange noises throughout the house. Guests also say they have seen the daughter Augusta, who died in the house from whooping cough, and F.E. Houghton himself smoking a pipe. But we got more ghosts coming for you at number 9, Hotel Europe in Vancouver. Now this building was completed in 1909 to be the prominent hotel in town, and it was, up until Hotel Vancouver opened up in 1916. After it lost the majority of the favorable clientele, the hotel fell into disrepute and
into a brothel. It eventually became a heritage building with a storefront on the main level though. So over this time, the areaways underground were filled up. These were paths underground that connected to the sidewalk so that freight could be loaded into the cellars in the basement. During the construction, one of the times the Hotel Europe changed, a contractor had a frightening experience. Apparently, he was working by himself on some repairs in the cellar, close up to a bricked up areaway door. The contractor left the cellar briefly just to fetch something, and when he returned, his tools were just scattered all around the floor. He then heard scratching noises coming from behind the brick wall and felt a bad presence. Scared and confused, he quickly gathered up his tools and left the cellar as fast as he could. After that, he flat out refused to work there again. Sometimes scratching noises can be heard coming from the other side of the bricked up areaway, and some people dispute, yeah, it could be mice. But you have to remember, the areaways were completely filled in, bricks and concrete. Later on, after all this, the owner of a poster store on the main floor of the building saw a figure in a black coat and flat cap in her store after closing the store on security camera. When she went to check on the possible lost customer, when she swore no one was there when she closed it, he was gone. She was rightly so shaken and closed up the store quickly that night, not sure if she was seeing things. But let's move on to number 8, the Crescent Hotel, the hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. So this used to be one of the most luxurious resorts when it opened in 1886. But tough economic times hurt the Crescent Hotel and it closed in the 1930s. In 1937, Norman Baker opened its doors once again and turned it into Baker's Cancer Curing Hospital, as a man without a medical degree. It was discovered that this fraud physician was indeed running a scam. Today, the hospital has returned to its former luxurious glory, but some spirits from the past still lurk around. Some spirits included are some of Baker's old patients, including a commonly spotted Theodora. She is most often spotted fumbling her keys outside room 419. Another spirit seen around the property is a man who helped build it, Michael, an Irish stonemason who fell to his death. If you happen to stay there, they have nightly ghost tours that end at the morgue, a morgue that still remains intact from its time as a hospital, and it is said to be a hotbed of paranormal activity.
If you want to eat healthy and feel your best, you gotta try Kachava. Kachava is the world's healthiest, all-in-one meal shake. It's made with over 70 plant-based superfoods and nutrients. Giving you all your essentials in one delicious meal.
Cheers!
Oh, hell yeah.
Thank you.
Just water, 2 scoops, blend and go. A complete meal in seconds to keep you going for hours. Only the highest quality plant-based ingredients to fuel your.
At number 7, Banff Springs Hotel, Alberta. So the Fairmont Banff Springs was actually one of the first railway hotels built in the 19th century by the Canadian Pacific Railway. It was built as a part of the aim to attract travelers westward. So the hotel denies that it is haunted, but that doesn't stop the guests who stay there from sharing the encounters that they have had. The long-standing story is that in 1932 there was a bride who died while falling down one of the hotel's grand stone staircases. Guests say they've seen her still in her wedding dress dancing alone in the Cascade Ballroom. Another hotel the Canadian Pacific Railway built is our number 6, the Royal York Hotel. So this one was opened in 1929 right across from the Union Station in Toronto. At the time, and to this day, it's one of Toronto's most grand hotels, like even the Queen has stayed there. But just like the Banff Springs Hotel, it is home to its fair share of ghost stories. People talk about hearing the sounds of children running up and down the halls, but once they check to see who is making all that noise, the hallway falls silent. It's not just some tricksters running around. Also, people underneath the now closed-off Crystal Ballroom report hearing voices and music coming from the vacant space. One guest even wrote on a Toronto blog that some chandeliers on the floor below it were trembling and the ceiling shook. So maybe some fancy ghosts took up residence after the ballroom was closed off permanently due to building and fire code violations. You know, our loss is some fancy ghost gain. At number 5, the Story Inn. This inn was built in 1851 in Indiana, and it truly does house quite the story. It is the only structure still left in a mining town called Story that was left inoperative after the Great Depression. It was restored and revitalized in the 1960s as a bed and breakfast, and it does have a frequent spectral guest, the Blue Lady. In the inn's guest books, there were records of a ghost called the Blue Lady who is believed to be the wife of the town's original founder, Dr. George Story. The guests of the inn record that her eyes are a hypnotic blue and she smells like cherry tobacco. To summon her, those who stay turn on the blue light beside the bed in what used to be her own room. Today, it's called the Blue Lady Room. So if she's feeling particularly nice, she will even leave behind blue items in that room if you are there to stay. At number 4, we have Mount Washington Hotel. Back in 1902, a businessman named Joseph Stickney built the hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The following year after completion, unfortunately, he passed away. It is believed that his widowed wife Carolyn now haunts the halls of the hotel, reliving the moments they had together. Hotel staff have reportedly spotted her descending the stairs for dinner and have also noticed lights inexplicably turning on and off in one of the towers. Sometimes she has been spotted standing on the balcony, looking off into the distance, lost in thought. Her 4-poster maple bed is still in room 314 and has become well known as the best place to see her. Guests have reported waking up to find a woman sitting at the end of their bed, slowly brushing her hair. I wonder if she's staring at them or off in the distance, because one of them is much creepier than the other. At number 3, La Fonda on the Plaza Santa Fe. While the structure of La Fonda was built in 1922, records say it's on the site of the city's first hotel dating all the way back to the early 17th century. So the New Mexico Hotel was a favored place for travelers headed west, and is home to a couple of guests that have passed on and refused to leave. The first ghost is the former Chief Justice of the Territorial Supreme Court, John P. Slough. He was shot to death in the hotel lobby and his spirit is said to have never left. The second specter scene is a distraught salesman. The man apparently jumped into the hotel well after gambling and losing on a bad hand. He has been seen emerging from the hotel fountain. Which I have to say, if you're gambling and you lose a bad hand, 1, don't gamble, maybe, and 2, only have good hands, that's what I do. Number 2, the Prince of Wales Hotel, Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario, Canada. This hotel was built in 1864 and went through a few other names before becoming the Prince of Wales Hotel in 1901. It was expanded in the 70s to add additional wings on either side, but the new additions blend in, so the original architecture looks the same. Also, tourists can't really notice. So even with all the changes to the hotel, the resident ghost has not been deterred. She already spent so much time there. 200 years. So Molly Maguire was in a wooden house where the hotel is today when Americans laid siege on the town. An American soldier was tasked with searching the house and found a dark figure looking out the window. Thinking it was a British soldier, he ran the figure through with his bayonet. But it was Molly. The soldier ran off, telling no one of his mistake of killing an innocent woman. Today, the spirit of Molly is said to haunt room 207, the approximate location of Molly's bedroom. People report waking up to footsteps echoing in their dark and empty room and random lights being on when they swear they turn them off. One guest even checked out because all the haunted happenings were just too much for them. Number 1, the Red Lion Inn in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. So, all the way back in 1773, a small tavern was established on the corner that would eventually house the Red Lion Inn. In 1896, while it was known as the Stockbridge House, the entire property burned down in a fire. It was rebuilt and opened the next year, then continued to change ownership and names throughout the years. With all of that history, the inn is said to have quite a bit of spiritual activity. Guests often see figures, including a young girl carrying flowers or a man in a top hat on the premises. But room 301 is the room to go if you really want a creepy encounter. One man recorded his experience on TripAdvisor. In the middle of the night, on 3 different occasions, I woke up feeling my toes being tugged on and someone scratching my hand. I also felt as if someone or something was under the covers with me at one point. Then, at 9 a.m. in the morning, I woke up when I heard the maid knocking at the door. She opened the room with the key, walked in, and headed for the bathroom. I heard the footsteps come out of the bathroom and stop by the bed. Then it suddenly felt as though someone was fluffing up the comforter as if trying to make up the bed on the left-hand side. As hard as I tried, I could not move and I could not speak. When I looked up, I realized that I was in the room alone and no one had been there. If I was that guy, I would check out of that place immediately, but he was there for a business conference and had to deal with it.
Coming into number 10, we have the Stanley Hotel. So the Stanley Hotel was the place that inspired Stephen King to write one of the most horrifying novels turned horrifying films of all time. The resort is in Colorado and built into the Rocky Mountains. The building has a rich history of paranormal goings-on across the entire hotel, but in particular the 4th floor. The most haunted room is supposed to be room 217. This is the room where King stayed the night and was also said to have once been the site of an unfortunate explosion. This is what Stephen King said about the stay that inspired what is arguably his most famous novel. He said, "I dreamt of my 3-year-old son running through the corridors, looking back over his shoulder, eyes wide, screaming. He was being chased by a fire hose. I woke up with a tremendous jerk, sweating all over, within an inch of falling out of bed. I got up, I lit a cigarette, I sat in the chair looking out of the window at the Rockies, and by the time the cigarette was done, I had the bones of my book firmly set in my mind." Stephen King for King, I love him. Also, I will say, staff who frequent the concert hall at the hotel at night report hearing the whispered words, "Get out," which would deeply deeply freaked me out. Coming into number 9, we have the Taj Mahal Palace. Located in India, although not actually in the famous Taj Mahal, this hotel has a woeful backstory. Despite the Mumbai hotel being grand and beautiful, it is said that the French architect W.A. Chambers accidentally built it backwards and was so distraught that he ended up committing suicide by jumping from the 5th floor. Now, according to a lot of first-hand reports from staff at the lavish hotel, the architect still roams the halls at night. The hotel was also the site of a terror attack in 2008. At this point, the hotel was seized and 31 people were killed there. The hotel was back up and running soon after as a symbol of strength and resilience, but the memory of the attacks live on. Coming into number 8, we have the Drovers Inn. Ah, Scotland. I dream of you always. I would stay anywhere in Scotland, even here. The Drovers Inn is located in Invernanan in Loch Lomond. The Drovers Inn dates back to the 1700s, a time when things were really kicking off in Scotland. The inn is the best kind of hotel because it's also a pub with just a small number of rooms, so you can get nice and cozy with those ghosts, of which there are many. Room 6 is said to be plagued by mysterious orb lights. A ghostly child appears in a pink dress on the staircase, and room 115 is haunted by a voyeur. It seems that a couple stayed in the room one night and were awoken by strange flashes. Thinking nothing of it, they went back to sleep. The next morning, when they were packing up, they found their camera out of place. Weird. They didn't think too much of it until later when they went through the pictures and there were some creepy images of the couple sleeping. The pair were freaked out as the room was locked from the inside when they went to bed, but nonetheless they called the inn to report the goings on. Now the inn responded and said that no staff would have had access to the room, and even if they had, they couldn't enter if it was locked from the inside. Creepy, although I'd still stay there just to be in Scotland. I love Scotland. Coming into number 7, we have Hotel Galvez. I have always wanted to go to Texas. I've never been, but I'm super keen. Although honestly, I'm keen to go everywhere and anywhere. But still, Texas is high up. Anyway, Hotel Galvez is located in Galveston Island on the Gulf of Mexico and was built in 1911. Over 100 years later, and the Queen of the Gulf is drawing in visitors, although it seems that some guests have never left. Rather than giving you a whole spiel like I usually would, I'm just gonna read you a TripAdvisor review from a spooked guest. Here goes. The hotel is so full of history and the interior is very beautiful. I didn't realize that the Galvez was known for its ghostly visitors, nor was I a believer, until now. My friend and I were walking the Galvez and my friend was calling out to Audra, a woman who hung herself in the hotel in the 1950s. Her room was 501 and we were staying a few rooms down. Anyway, we go to sleep that night and at around 5 AM I woke up and my hotel door is open and the latch is still on and I'm thinking, oh my god. We were intoxicated, so I guess we just left the door open. So I close the door and I go back to bed and I wake up at around 8 AM and I tell my friend that we left the door open last night. Then I get out of bed and walk over to the door to show her how far it was. And to my amazement, the door kept closing all the way. It just wouldn't stay open. It's spring-loaded, so I was confused. Anyway, that's my story of the Galvez. Blimey, this is what happens when you call upon spirits, I'm just saying. Coming into number 6, we have Murder Castle. What do you mean you don't want to stay at Murder Castle? Sounds lovely. So actually you can't, thankfully, stay here anymore. It's been torn down. H.H. Holmes's murder mansion has been demolished, but the site is now the Englewood Post Office. So I read The Devil in White City earlier this year before a trip to Chicago, and honestly it was really terrifying. H.H. Holmes was a real man who built a hotel in Englewood, Chicago in order to kill people. He booby-trapped the place so that guests couldn't escape their rooms, and he would often knock them unconscious using hidden gas valves. Many of the hotel's rooms were outfitted with chutes that would drop bodies into the basement, where Holmes would then dissolve them in acid to rid himself of the evidence. The infamous serial killer confessed to killing 27 people at the property, which housed tourists visiting the Chicago World Fair. It is actually anticipated that he killed.
This is not a water bottle. It's an air-up bottle that flavors ordinary water through scent using flavor pots. This is Joanne, getting her daily dose of hydration without sugar or additives. And this is Bob, unnecessarily throwing his coins away in the vending machine. You're lost, Bob. Air Up. It's not a water bottle. Discover now.
A lot more than that. As many as 200 people were thought to have lost their lives in the building. Coming into number 5, we have the Russell Hotel. If you hear a creak in the night at the Russell Hotel in Sydney, chances are there's a ghoul on the loose or lurking in the shadows. The Russell Hotel is no stranger to mysterious midnight moans and groans, but the most enduring legend is of a spirit of a sailor who roams the hotel, but most often causes trouble in room 8. Guests have seen him lurking over their bed, staring at them in the night. That's a no from me, sir. Back on your ship. Okay, but despite the ghost and everything, you should actually stay here because it's one of the nicest and most beautiful places I've ever been in the world. Coming into number 4, we have Fairmont Banff Springs. I went to the Fairmont Banff Springs earlier this year and it was absolutely breathtaking. The building dates back to 1888 and was a Grand Railway Hotel. The building is a National Historic Site of Canada, but it is teeming with ghosts and ghouls. It is said that a secret room was constructed during the original build, which was only discovered when a fire broke out in 1926. Speaking of fire, some say a burning bride haunts the sweeping ballroom. The story goes that as she walked down a staircase lined with candles, her dress caught fire. In a panic, she tripped and fell, dying from a broken neck. Some say that her spirit haunts both the bridal suite and the ballroom, where she can be seen dancing with flames licking her dress. Also reported it's the spectre of a bellman who haunts the 9th floor, and an apparition of a bartender, and, get this, a headless bagpipe player. How that works? I mean, you go figure. The real deal here though is room 837. Legend has it that this is the room that a grisly murder took place in, and that guests who stay here are awoken in the middle of the night by screaming. Bloody handprints have also been spotted on the room's mirror. On the upside though, I will once again reiterate that this is one of the nicest hotels in the world and it's absolutely stunning, and there's a beautiful lobby dog called Bear. Coming into number 3, we have the Langham. The Langham is a beautiful and very fancy hotel in London. Shout out to my former hometown. The luxury 5-star rooms come with a hefty price tag and some extra ghouls. The hotel opened in 1865 and was said to have been the suicide spot of a German prince who jumped from the 4th floor. He can still be seen at the window he once fell from. A doctor involved in a murder-suicide can also be found pacing the halls, and none other than Emperor Napoleon III still haunts the basement. Room 333 is said to be the most haunted of them all, with many a spectre wanting a sleepover. The most famous ghost, inclusive to room 333, is a man in Victorian dress who likes to watch people sleeping. Whether or not it's he who shakes the bed violently at night, we don't know. Damn, I forgot to tell you about the ghost with the gaping wound on its face. Next time. Coming into number 2, we have the Stay on Main. There are 16 very good reasons not to stay at this cursed hotel in Los Angeles. Oh, and also don't let the new name fool you. This is the legendary cursed Cecil Hotel, most recently in the news because of the disappearance of Alyssa Lamb in 2013. The Canadian tourist was found dead in the hotel's water tank, surrounded by her belongings, after going missing for 3 weeks. CCTV footage was released of her acting very strangely in an elevator before her mysterious and to this day unsolved death. It literally looks like she's pleading with someone invisible, which freaks me out. Before her death, the hotel was already wrapped up in 16 other grisly, untimely deaths. It's actually thought that the Black Dahlia, a murdered rising Hollywood star, stayed at the hotel before her death. Oh, and it was also said to be the home of serial killers Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger. I feel like it just needs to be knocked down and the grounds cleansed with holy water or something. Finally, coming into number 1, you've all heard of Egyptian curses, but we're a little far from Egypt here. We've got the Luxor Hotel. Las Vegas is a place for tortured souls, so it's kind of understandable that so many hotels on the Strip are reported to be haunted. I could legitimately make a whole top 10 list about hotels not to stay at in Vegas, but for this list I'm just keeping it to the one. Luxor Hotel is an Egyptian themed hotel, but it may have angered the old gods. Many people think that it's cursed. Why? Well, attention to detail was actually lacking when the hotel was built. The Sphinx in the hotel is facing east rather than west, west, and the building of the pyramid doesn't have the required eye on the top, which is just utter disrespect, right? The Luxor has had very consistently high death rates over the years since it opened in 1993, and a string of misfortune that's also surrounded it. Some people say that 7 people died whilst building the hotel. In 1996, a woman jumped from the 26th floor of the building and now haunts the lobby. Another man died while he drunkenly fell from the 10th floor. A hand bomb went off in the parking garage in 2007, killing an employee. In 2010, a UNLV football player dropped dead following a fight, and in 2012, a casino employee was murdered by her boyfriend, once again in the lobby. 2012 was also a bad year for the hotel's rep, as 3 guests caught Legionnaire's disease, with a further case reported in 2017. One of the guests even died as a result. Guests have spotted ghost riders in the boats along the replica River Nile, and in case that was
Do you want a satisfying, remote-friendly job that pays well? Become a software engineer in only 10 months.
Coming in at number 10, we have a spooky chapel. So this is terrifying. In Telford, UK, Pat and Diane Fowler wondered what was inside a square box seal next to a wall at the bottom level of their house. They opened it up and then they found a metal grill in their floor. Eventually, they went below the grill and found a totally eerie stone chamber that looked like an old chapel. It even had a crucifix on the floor. They then found that there was a staircase leading into a cupboard in another area of the house. Weird. Coming in at number 9, we have mythical creatures. According to YouTube channel Incredible News E3, some strange creatures were found in a basement of a mansion in the UK. Allegedly in the 60s in London, an old mansion belonging to a Thomas Theodore Merlin was being prepared for demolition. As people were searching and doing a final check, wooden boxes were found in the basement. Now inside these wooden boxes were what looked like alien and fairy carcasses. They now reside in the Maryland Museum. Now the museum does exist, but I'm calling fake news all over the findings. I'm sure that they were weird things in the boxes, but they to me look a bit like models. Coming into number 8, we have this picture. Okay, I'm sure all kinds of things are going on in medical school basements, but imagine being in a group of modern day students that found this picture. Basically, it's a group of classmates from times gone by posing with a corpse that they were using for dissection. Nothing like a good class snap. Reddit is an endless source of creepy basement story sharing joy. For example, check out this horrifying door one guy found in his workplace basement at number 7. Hi! No, absolutely not. Put it away. Firstly, why does it look like a prison door? And secondly, what the heck is that family dynamic? That baby is a creep fest. Wait, actually, they're all kind of creep fests. I don't want to look at them anymore. One Redditor wrote, "It looks like Leatherface got into arts and crafts. Texas Chainsaw Arts and Crafts Massacre." I think that's pretty accurate. Taking a sad turn for the next 2 points at number 6, we have mummified infants. How sad is this? In 2010, a woman in LA discovered a trunk in her apartment building's basement. In the trunk, she found loads of Peter Pan memorabilia and the mummified remains of 2 newborns. Weirdly, the trunk seemed to belong to a J.M. Barrie, the name of the author of Peter Pan. After DNA testing, it turns out the woman was a Janet M. Barrie. She basically identified with the author, but she wasn't any relation. But she had stowed the baby's remains away in the 1930s, and they'd laid there undiscovered for almost 80 years. Horrifyingly similar at number 5, we have 2 fetuses in a jar. In 2012, William C. Neff made a shocking discovery of 2 semi-formed babies preserved in jars. He found this at the basement of his home in Hannibal, Missouri. The discovery came as a result of renovation work going on in the building. After the gruesome finding, it was discovered that the building had been used as an illegal abortion clinic in the 1900s. Coming in at number 4 of the top 10 insane things found in a basement, we have a stranger. Like, hello there, and who are you, and why are you in my basement? This is very much a question that these Ohio State University kids had on their lips when they discovered a secret door in their basement that then led to a secret bedroom in which a mystery man called Jeremy was living in. Jeremy, what are you doing there? The group of lads thought that there was a ghost in the house that opened the oven and the cupboard doors, but it turns out it was Jeremy. This sounds way too good to be true. One museum found that they were sitting on a hidden wine vault, and that is coming into number 3. Researchers at New Jersey's Keene University discovered a hidden wine vault in the basement of the Liberty Hall History Museum. There were 50 bottles of wine and other spirits that date back 300 years, just like sitting there. The loot included a 1796 case of Madeira. Now this wine is known for its longevity, so it probably still tastes good. There was also a whole bunch of Cuban cigars. What a finding. Coming in at number 2, we have NASA secrets. Oh my. In 2015, a dealer was cleaning out a Pittsburgh basement of a deceased IBM engineer who worked for NASA during the space race era. So this was from the late 50s to the mid 70s. They found a whole load of NASA files on 2 giant computers. 93 of the tapes that they found had data about Pioneer 10 and Pioneer 11. Now these were flyby missions to Jupiter and Saturn. How cool is that? Finally, coming in at number 1, this scares me a lot, somebody found a dozen live sharks in a basement. Officers from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation searched a home in LaGrangeville. The authorities found a homemade pool in the basement filled with 7 live sand sharks and a dead hammerhead shark and other smaller sharks. The sharks were caught and taken to the Long Island Aquarium. Seriously though, who keeps sharks in their basement? No!
Starting us off with number 10 is the eye. Now this one was shared by Redditor JLKanga23, who said this happened when she was 12 years old. One of her mum's friends from church asked if she and some others would come over and pray all over his house. Apparently, as soon as he moved in, things just changed. His wife's personality changed completely, he had started seeing shadows himself, and his daughter just started acting very bizarre as well. Now their house had a storm basement that he'd never gone into because he always got an evil feeling from it. The group got to his house and the user's mum had brought her along because she was too young to be left at home. Now they opened the basement to find a bunch of ritualistic or voodoo-like symbols that had been graffitied onto the walls. Already that would have been a red flag for me. I would have been like, nah, B, miss me with that. Now there was one eye symbol that the user could never get out of her mind even till this day. And that wasn't even the worst part. Scattered all around the floor were dozens and dozens of dried out dead animals. I'm talking cats, rabbits, chickens, dogs, you name it, they were there. There's no way they had gotten down there themselves since there weren't any chickens in the town anyway, so someone purposely brought them there for whatever purpose. And clearly some ritualistic had been going on down there, so no wonder all that bad juju infected his entire family. I get it.
And at 9, the man and the girl. So the story goes that this boy, who we'll call Mike, was hanging out with his older sister and their friend Andy, who had come to visit. Andy was staying in the basement, so all the kids would hang down there and play video games. Once when they were playing, Andy heard a noise and asked if anyone else heard, to which neither Mike or his sister did. A few moments later, Andy and Mike both heard a noise which sounded like it came from a little girl. Mike's older sister dismissed his warning and said it was probably from the game. They kept playing, and about 15 minutes later, they heard another sound, like a nail dragging on a bench and then falling to the ground. At this point, Mike and Andy decided to go upstairs while Mike's sister continued playing the game. Shortly after, Mike's sister came upstairs saying she heard a man's voice and it wasn't from the game. It looked like she had seen a ghost. When their dad came home, he checked it out, said it was their imagination, and not to say anything to their mother because it'd scare her. He did, however, find the nail on the ground next to his bench by his workshop in the shed. Years later, Mike was visiting his new family home, and his dad was joking about the basement in the old family home. Upon hearing the story, Mike's mother asked why she never heard this story, and explained when she was home alone, she'd seen the shadows of a man and a little girl in the basement. Ooh, spooky. Nothing happened to her, but she always thought it was scary.
Now,
most people have no clue that in 2023, the best way to make money on Amazon is not with physical products. It's Amazon's other company, Audible. Audible pays me $8,000 to $10,000 every single month in passive income, and I'm not the only one. People like Katrina and Carla, Elena, Renee, all making thousands of dollars a month in passive income using the same system. And the best part is it's literally a done-for-you system. You're not buying any merchandise, you're not storing any merchandise, you're not shipping any merchandise, and you need zero tech skills to get started in making thousands of dollars a month in passive income from Audible. Now, I wish I could say I'm the genius who discovered this method, but I'm not. I learned everything from the Mickelson twins. I took their free training, the same free training that's linked below, turned around and made my first $100 in 7 days. And you could be next. All you need to do is click the link and I'll take you to a free workshop where you'll learn the same done-for-you 4-step process that we are using to make thousands of dollars every month in passive income. The reason people are having such amazing results so fast is because hardly anyone knows about this. Look, you could ignore this just because it's an ad, or you can click the link below and find out why this 4-step process is working for so many people and why it can work for you. And just by clicking the link and watching the short training today, you're gonna get 3 bonuses that have not been offered before. So click the link to claim your bonuses and get in on the ground floor of this amazing opportunity for passive income. Look, the most important thing you can do right now is don't waste any more time. Click the link, go through the free training, and learn the 4-step process that is providing financial freedom for so many others. Click the link and I'll see you in the training.
The new best way to make money online that nobody's talking about is something you've never heard before. It's using remote automation. So these right here are real paychecks that I've received every month for the past 2 years from just one of the businesses I've helped with copy and paste automations. The first is for $8,358. This one's for $11,000. This one's also for $11,000. This one's for $6,800, $6,600. And yeah, so these are real paychecks.
And number 8, we have the dolls. And honestly, this one isn't even creepy because, oh, it was found out of nowhere, and oh, which psycho was behind this one. I feel like, no, this basement is intentionally creepy. Hanny's, a restaurant in Phoenix, Arizona, has a very interesting basement that probably makes most of their customers just lose their appetites. The owners are eccentric and strange in their own regard, but they installed an homage to the Last Supper in their basement. And that would have been fine had the installation not featured a bunch of creepy ass dolls. Like, why? Why? If that's what I find at a restaurant, I'm automatically gonna think about the food. Like, if that's what's down there, what are they putting in my food that I don't know of? It just creeps me out. I don't want to be there. The whole thing's just very sus.
Moving on to number 7, the 2 jars. While renovating a property in Hannibal, Missouri, 2 workers made a gruesome discovery that shed some historical light on the property. William C. Neff owned the property, which he inherited from his parents, and told local news stations that he believes the homeowners before his parents ran an illegal abortion clinic in the early 1900s. Neff's parents bought the property in the 1950s, which is where his father ran his chiropractic clinic from. As William grew up, his parents would tell him about these jars they found in the basement, but didn't go into much detail. And for good reason. The workers who unfortunately stumbled upon the jars found 2 fetuses sitting in formaldehyde. When speaking on the incident, William said, "I know they did medical procedures and stuff. I was told they helped a lot of ladies. That's all I know." Referring to the old owners of the house before his parents.
Coming in at number 6 now is Benjamin Franklin. No, he wasn't found in a basement, but what a plot twist that would have been if that was a story. So back in 1998, a group of construction workers were doing some repairs in the basement of the house at 36 Craven Street. It didn't take them long to find more than 1,200 pieces of human and non-human bone in a pit that was 1 meter wide and deep. First of all, the hell going on with that? Archaeologists were called in to investigate the site, and they pinpointed the time period in which they think the bones were buried. They estimated that they had been there since the mid to late 1700s, and do you know who was the resident of that house between 1756 and 1775? Founding father Benjamin Franklin. And I mean, we know he wasn't a crazed serial killer murderer, so someone make it make sense. Apparently the bones are from an anatomy school that was run in the house, and the surgical marks on the bones backed that story up. But wouldn't it have been much more spicy if it was Benjamin Franklin's doing and he was a serial killer? We like a bit of juice.
Next up at number 5, the tombstone. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I found a tombstone in my basement, I'd probably move out that same day and put my house up for sale. That's just some bad juju. Bad vibes. Not here for it. So the story here is Derek Kruk was exploring his basement and stumbled upon something he hadn't noticed before on the floor. After cleaning the area and wiping the floor of the dust and whatever else was on the floor, Derek realized he had discovered a tombstone in his basement. Was the house he was living in built on top of someone's body? Could it be haunted? So many questions, and I have all the answers. No. Derek called up some friends to tell them about his discovery, and upon doing some digging, no pun intended, they soon learned the tomb belonged to Jabez Hardin, who fought in the War of 1812. However, after help from local resident Chip Mangio, who did some of his own research, it was determined that this war veteran actually wasn't buried beneath the home. Chip, who is the head of a local charitable organization that helps assist local charities, inspected every tomb at a local cemetery until he came across Hardin's. Chip went on to explain Hardin's old stone was most likely given away after his new stone was created. He went on to say, gravestones travel. you'll actually find gravestones as part of water spouts or walkways because they're still good stones and they're expensive. So at the end of the day, Derek can rest easy knowing his house wasn't built on a grave, but still, knowing your house was made partly with tombstone, even if the house isn't haunted, the basement has got to be redone. Bad stuff's happening down there, I can promise you that right now.
Now number 4 is the painting. This one's from Reddit user Fonzie327, who said in his junior year of college he moved into a house with his best friend. They started moving their boxes into the house and put a bunch of things in the basement. Now the basement itself was basically this unfinished concrete square that contained a smaller room inside of it that had the water heater and other pipes in it. Now the boys started looking around and started checking out what's already there, and they found a huge painting in the smaller room. It's about 3 feet tall, and when they turn it around they see the creepiest thing ever. The painting is of a guy wearing a pink onesie and the hood has bunny ears on it. He's holding a knife in his hand that's pointed at his own stomach, kind of like he's about to stab himself, and of course he's got the biggest smile on his face ever. Now I get art is subjective and fair enough, I don't have the right to be like that's creepy, but here's the mic drop moment we're waiting for. Now they realize the boy in the painting is being painted from the inside of the smaller room looking onto the rest of the basement. The doorway he's leaning on is exactly the same as the one in the basement, and so they were like, hell no, we're getting out of here, and they probably just broke their lease. That's what I would do, to be honest.
At number 3, the Urban Explorer. Our friend here, who we'll call Jeff, had a knack for exploring that which is now abandoned. I don't know why, but when things are abandoned, there's usually a good reason for it. And in this case, it was probably what this guy found in the basement. So the story goes, Jeff here and his pal Josh went venturing into an old abandoned farmhouse about an hour from their hometown. Rumor had it this farmhouse was once used for a cult, so you know things were gonna get weird. At first, when they walked in, Josh found a photo of the family who the 2 explorers believed used to live there. However, their faces in the photo were scratched out. Weird. As the 2 went downstairs, Jeff, making his way down the old creaky wooden stairs, would find himself going right down to the basement floor as the 5th step from the bottom caved in. It took a moment for Jeff to realize what had happened. He was standing in a basement with water up to his ankles, as well as cuts and a ton of splinters in both legs. The agonizing pain started to spread up to Jeff's torso, and he started to feel dizzy. Before he blacked out, Jeff surveyed the basement and believes he saw a face and some movement in a dark corner. Upon waking up, he found out that Josh had called 911, which was the right call. Jeff needed to be vaccinated, stitched up, and get the splinters taken out of his legs. To this day, he doesn't know what he saw in that basement, but I don't think he'll be going back anytime soon to find out.
Filling our number 2 slot now is the comatose woman. Back in 2008, a man in Austria brought a comatose woman to a hospital. She was in critical condition, her kidney was about to shut off, and she was on the brink of death, but her ailing condition wasn't even the most worrying part about the whole thing. It was the circumstances surrounding her admittance that really worried the staff. The man who brought her in claimed he wasn't related to her and just showed up with a note from her mum telling him to bring the girl to the hospital. The girl's kidney wasn't even the only thing failing, her teeth were rotting, she was malnourished, there was a lot going on under the surface, and doctors were determined to find out what was going on. They didn't know it at the time, but the man was Josef Fritzl, who's been mentioned on the channel many times, one of the most notorious criminals of all time. He built a chamber in his basement, and after getting his daughter to help him install the door, he drugged her and then locked her in there for 24 years. In this basement, he raped and impregnated his daughter multiple times, like she had 7 kids while in captivity. His dumbass wife kept believing him when he told her the kids were just orphans that were left at their door. Finally, one of the basement children fell ill, which is when his crimes came to light and when authorities found another secret basement he had built, but thankfully no one was in this one.
And finally, number 1, the confinement room. Now this one really hit close to home because I had never heard of this story, yet it happened when I was 17 years old and in Pickering, which is about an hour away from where I grew up. So back in November of 2011, contractors working on an old abandoned home made a scary discovery in the basement. What was described as a confinement styled room with a thick door and several locks was enough to start a police investigation. Reports claim the house hadn't been lived in since 2006, but this room looked as if it had been constructed within the last year or 2. Detective Darren Short explained, "I can't get into what was in the room."
I made over $10 million on Amazon. If I lost it all and had to rebuild in today's AI age, here's exactly what I would do. First, I would use AI to find a popular product on Alibaba that I could buy for a few cents. Then I would sell the same thing on Amazon for a few dollars, and I'll do this over and over and over again. I made millions copy and pasting products this way. Just look at these golden cups. They cost 4 pennies on Alibaba, yet thousands of people paid $29 for this on Amazon. And so many of my friends have retired in their 20s and 30s by actually doing this. Because there are tons of products like these golden cups that you can flip in your spare time. This jewelry cleaner is $1.50 on Alibaba, yet thousands of people pay $35 for the exact same thing on Amazon. Now, every single time someone copy and paste this product from Alibaba to Amazon, they make $33. In fact, this person is doing this right now, is making $330,000 in sales last month. But here's the big secret. It's not just this jewelry cleaner. There are lots of products that you can find on Alibaba and quickly sell on Amazon for 5 to 10x the original price. Like this rainbow silverware that's $1 on Alibaba, yet thousands of people pay $25 for the exact same thing. How about this pizza blanket for $4 on Alibaba, yet the person selling it for $28 on Amazon makes $182,000 in sales every single month. Oh, and this dog bed that's $35 on Alibaba, hundreds of people buy it on Amazon for $239 every single month. That's $200 profit per unit sold. And the person selling this makes over $215,000 in monthly sales. You see, most people think you have to create the next Tesla or come up with a shark.
But the way it was constructed, the time and effort put into it, and the materials used clearly indicated it was a room designed to hold somebody in. There was a locking mechanism nobody would be able to penetrate or breach. The previous homeowners had nothing to do with the newly constructed room, and police never did solve the curious case. So what were they trying to hide in there? What was someone trying to keep in there, really, is the more important question. Creepy. Scary. Basement I don't want to travel to, because that's a scary basement.
At number 10, we have It Chapter 1. This scene was in the original trailer for the movie, and it was this clip that really made me go, oh, I gotta see this movie. Let's take a look. The scene combines so many creepy things into one explosive freak show. You have a flooded basement to scare anyone who might have a fear of drowning. Then you have the rotted corpse of Georgie, and of course the horrifying Pennywise vibrating through the water like a rogue washing machine. And of course the basement is just the cherry on top of this whole thing. Like imagine the same scene was happening in a living room or a kitchen, there's like a fireplace going. It just wouldn't be as scary. You need a dark, moldy, wet, creepy basement to really send the horror factor home. Also, once you walk down to the basement, there's only one way out. So if that creepy clown crawls up to the doorway before you do, then you're gonna end up Clown Chow, which is also the name of the Pennywise themed breakfast cereal that I'm going to invent. It'll have marshmallows in it that are shaped like disemboweled kids. At number 9, we have Little Creeps. A girl named Samantha was looking for a place to live in downtown Vancouver. The rent prices were kind of crazy, but she was determined to live downtown, so she kept digging. She came across a basement apartment that was way cheaper than the rest. So cheap, it was a little suspicious, but she still wanted to check it out. And it was beautiful. This only made things more suspicious. She looked into reports about the place. Maybe there was black mold, but nothing came up. She decided that she was just lucky, and then she signed the lease and moved in. For the first month, everything was fine. But then she started to get these strange nightmares. She dreamt of a child laughing and running around her bed. But the dreams progressed, and the child would contort and shift into this horrible shape, like all his bones were breaking, and then his eyes would sink into the back of his head until there were black pits. The creature would move closer and closer to her, and she would always wake up in a cold sweat before it touched her. Then one night, in her horrible nightmare, it got close, and it bit into her face. She woke up screaming. She had a sharp pain all over her face. She then looked into the mirror and saw black bite marks on her cheek. It was safe to say that she didn't spend another night there. At number 8, we have Tremors. Tremors was one of my favorite monster movies when I was a kid. It's campy, cheesy, and has all the pieces of a bad movie from the 80s. And I think there's like 8 of these movies. Now, laughable as these movies are now, the Tremor creature I always found super creepy. I mean, look at this thing. These are giant slug-like monsters that can dig underground like moles, and they have thermal vision. And they also have those tentacle things that come out of their mouths, and they are hideous. There was a time in monster movies where they used real props, and they always looked slimy. It was so gross. It was just, ugh. Even just thinking about it grosses me out right now. At number 7, we have The Break-In. 2 brothers were home alone late one night, and they heard a crash in the basement. They assumed it might have just been something that fell over, and they figured they'd wait until the morning before they cleaned it up. Then they heard another crash, and it sounded sounded like something was shuffling down there. They lived far into the country, so chances of it being someone breaking in were pretty low. It was most likely an animal. So they decided they would try and trap it and then set it loose. They grabbed a blanket to wrap around it and then a shovel to protect themselves. They walked into the basement expecting to see a raccoon or a possum or something like that, but what they saw was way creepier. They described it as a humanoid body, hairless, with long fingers that were almost like claws. They then looked at them and then they saw its face. Its skin looked like it was pulled over a skull and had teeth that looked like they were filed down into points. It hissed at them and then crawled out through the basement window. And then it was gone into the night. They could never prove what they saw that night, but they never, ever forgot. At number 6, we have The Haunting of Hill House. If you are looking for a solid horror movie series, then you have to check out The Haunting of Hill House. There are so many little scares in this show that when I watched the recap to make this list, I found even more ghost sightings that I had missed from the first time I watched it. And the basement scene is one of the best parts.
Atera is the IT painkiller. Remote monitoring and management, remote access, help desk and ticketing, smart automations, patching, software deployment, scripting. And the amazing thing is that it does all this while still being easy to use. It's magical. Just this clean, intuitive UI where everything is where it's supposed to.
Yeah, being stuck underground with a crawling mummy coming towards you when you're 10 years old is one of the worst things I could imagine happening in my life. My sister told me there were monsters under my bed when I was a kid, and it messed me up for like years. I feel this kid's pain. At number 5, we have The Cage. A family's grandmother passed away and they were left with her house. Instead of selling it, they decided they would keep it, renovate it, and maybe turn it into a nice summer home. They were gutting out the basement when they found a hidden panel. It moved a wall and revealed a secret staircase. This was strange. Not only did the family think they knew their grandmother very well, but the staircase seemed like it had been used recently. They walked down into a secret room, and down there they found a horror. Chained to the wall was a beast. It looked like it used to be a man but had been experimented on, like someone had sewn in animal parts to the body. It looked like someone had cut off the feet and hands and replaced them with hooves, stitched fur into the back. And the creature was gnawing on a piece of rotted flesh, and then it looked at them and the eyes had actually been plucked out and the holes threaded closed. How long had this thing been down there? At number 4, we have Lights Out. This scene takes place right outside of a basement, so I thought it was perfect, and it's also creepy, so I wanted to include it.
Okay, I'll get her, I promise. Come on! Right now!
Just look into that face. The eyes are ripped out of the head. You just see those black pits. It's so gross. And then it reveals the creature standing behind her. I love it. I haven't watched Lights Out in its entirety. It didn't really grab me, but this scene is definitely one of the better parts of the movie. At number 3, we have A Growling Surprise. Now this one isn't supernatural, but trust me, it's just as frightening. You don't have to be a creature from the other side in order to make people freak out. This story comes way of electrician Dave Corin. He was hired to install some cabling in a home in New Jersey. He went down to the basement and was feeding some of the cable through some of the holes he had made. And then he heard a strange noise. It sounded like a large animal growling at him. He picked up his flashlight and shined it through one of the holes that he made to feed cable through, and on the other side of the hole he saw a grizzly. All that was between him and 1,500 pounds of bone-crushing power was a few pieces of plywood. So he did what any sensible human would do, and he ran for his life. At number 2, we have A Quiet Place. Possibly one of the best horror movies in recent years. It's starring Jim from The Office. Who knew we would love him just as much, covered in rags and fighting for his life? If you haven't seen A Quiet Place, then let me give you a quick breakdown. There's these monsters, they're nearly indestructible, they love to eat people, and they use sound to locate their prey. Emily Blunt had just had a baby, and it's floating in a flooded basement, and then this happens. The tension is unbelievable in this scene. Everyone watching is like, oh my god, you gotta save the baby, but that baby better not cry. And you can feel anxiety growing inside you. It's terrifying. Just thinking about the scene gives me anxiety. Also, when I saw this movie in theaters, I got nachos as my snack, which is a terrible choice. The whole movie is people being quiet, and you just heard me like I had to take a nacho, put it in my mouth, and I would squish it with my mouth instead of chewing them. At number 1, we have a new home. A family had just purchased a new home, and it seemed like it was going to be the starting of a happy new life. But it didn't take long before things started going to hell. There's a husband, wife, and their 2 daughters that moved into the house, and it didn't matter who went into the basement, but they all felt the same strange feeling when they went down there, like something was watching them. The dad figured that the basement just needed to be spruced up a little bit, so he started doing some renovations. Late one night, he was working on the basement and he felt something strange. Not the feeling of being watched, but a feeling of terror deep in his stomach. He slowly turned and then he saw it, a tall, shadowy figure. It looked as if its body was made of a black abyss. He tried to scream, but he couldn't. He tried to move, but he couldn't. He was paralyzed. He stared into the endless darkness of this thing and he saw horrors. His family murdered, his own suicide, torture, mutilation, cannibalism, and then he passed out. He woke up on the floor of the basement and then ran out. His family was all fine, but that was the last night they would spend in this house. They never went back, and sometimes when the father sleeps, he can see the endless blackness of this creature in his dreams.
Alright, coming in at number 10 now, we have Joshua Rules. In 2015, a man took his brother along with him to go house hunting in Michigan when they stumbled across a dirty, wet, and unfinished basement. They saw writing on the wall, and when they took a closer look, they realized that a child used to live down there. One wall read Josh's rules. Number 1, stop reading your walls. Number 2, no watching Isaiah through the hole. And number 3, no writing or drawing on the walls. Number 4, if you don't like these rules, go to number 0. Other messages said things like, don't climb into my room, or, and I think this one is the creepiest, stop watching me. The man posted all of these pictures to Reddit, where users came up with their theories ranging from schizophrenia to the supernatural. Very strange stuff either way. Next up at number 9 now, we have Satan. In 2015, Imgur user Bushi992 posted these pictures to Imgur of the basement and attic in the house that he and his friends had just moved into. As you can see, something went down here. The symbols appear to be satanic in nature. There were pentagrams, rams, snakes, and strange messages on the wall, such as, for I am the earth and within me the devil burns. Many people asked them why didn't they ask to see the attic and basement before they moved in. I think that's a very good point. I'm not sure if I could sleep knowing this stuff was below me. At number 8 now, we have the tape. Reddit user Lumberjack shared pictures of a small basement passageway that he discovered in his new home. Inside it, he found a locked door, which concealed an entrance to a small room. Inside that room was a briefcase and a safe. He opened that and found some money, a few watches, and videotapes. The tapes had writing on the front of them. One of them simply read, no, 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 no. He handed everything over to the police for investigation. Would you guys have done the same, or would you have ignored the message and watched the tape? I'm not sure if I could have. Okay, next up at number 7 now, we have the tombstone. In 2016, a student from Massachusetts made a grim discovery in their university house basement, a grave. Derek Crook was interviewed about the tombstone next to the boiler in his home. The message on it says, this marks the burial site of Jabez Hardin, who served in the War of 1812. Now he died in 1879 at the age of 83. At first, the housemates were very creeped out by this find, but now James actually quite enjoys shocking visitors to the house by randomly announcing there's a grave in the basement. Maybe that's just his coping mechanism. Next up at number 6, we have graffiti. In 2012, Reddit user Tallest Waldo shared a creepy discovery he found in his basement. This writing, accompanied by some very strange symbols. Another Reddit user identified the symbols as being part of occult spellcasting. They suggested this basement used to be a cult member's ritual workspace. After meditating on the symbols for a while, it seems they had an epiphany and wrote the message that we can now see on the wall. I can kind of make out something about their soul being fire, and the time has come to use the gateway they have opened. What do you guys think it says? I'm not even sure if I want to know. At number 5 now, guys, we have Peter Pan. In 2010, a woman in LA found something very disturbing in her basement. Wrapped in newspapers from the 1930s were the mummified remains of 2 newborn infants. They were wrapped up with a copy of Peter Pan and a membership card to the Peter Pan Woodland Club. Detectives identified who did this, a woman called J.M. Barrie, who coincidentally had the same name as the author of the book, but was of no relation. What police have never figured out, though, is the purpose purpose of this? What did this symbolize? Was this woman trying to convey a message about her dead newborns and the story of Peter Pan's Never Neverland? We may never know. At the number 4 spot now, we have mold. In 2005, a family who moved into a new home were decorating one of the rooms when they noticed the bookcase was a little bit loose. They nudged it and it swung open to reveal a secret passageway. Inside, they found a note that read, "Hello, if you're reading this, then you found the secret room." The letter went on to explain how they were the previous tenant of the house but had to move out because of mold, which made their children very sick. The new owners who were reading this actually listened to the warning and moved out because of the mold too. They even sued the broker who sold them the house. I'm sure they're happy they got the warning, but I would be a little bit creeped out to find a note that congratulated me for finding the secret room. Very weird stuff. Alright, next up at number 3 now, we have the asylum. Now, not much is known about the picture you're about to see or even who took it, but I think that kind of adds to the whole mysterious allure of it. This was the writing found on the basement wall of an abandoned mental asylum. It reads, "I never knew much about people until I took one apart just to see how it worked." Many commenters online have speculated who exactly wrote this and if perhaps the story behind this message could lead to the reason the asylum was abandoned in the first place. Moving on to the number 2 spot now, we have drugs. Imgur user Boymers shared a couple of pictures from the basement of a house that he moved into in 2012. Now, the landowner had told him that the previous tenants were, quote, hardcore drug users. They didn't really see any evidence of this though. That was until they went into the basement. This was the sight they were met with when they arrived. It appears to be a message written in blood. The numbers 41 and 90 are large and prominent, surrounded by a bunch of random letters and the handprints of the people who made this. Other numbers on the wall include 82, 6 and 35. What does this all mean? Is this some sort of secret code? Whoever took the time to make this must have thought these numbers held some real significance, because it looks like they use their own blood. And finally, at number 1 now, we have the bunker. Now for me, a bunker is basically a huge creepy basement with nothing above it. It's like a super basement. In 2014, an Imgur user shared a story and pictures from when they visited a friend in northern Germany. In the woods, they found an abandoned bunker. They followed the endless hospital-like hallways. As they ventured deeper and deeper, they found graffiti on the walls with words like die and help. Eventually, they came across a huge yellow vault door that had been ripped off its hinges. A worrying sight to see. What could have been that powerful? A little further on, they found the creepiest writing so far. A message in German that translates to "Hello Satan, I love you." It wasn't long before they just turned back. That clearly isn't a place you want to stick around in for too long.
And at number 10, with ghost children in the basement. A lot of people claim that their basements are haunted by evil spirits or ghosts that have unfinished business. Either way, it is extremely scary when you hear footsteps, screaming, or loud abrupt noises from the basement without any reasonable explanations. This is why when this happens, people install cameras with motion detection so they're able to get a notification when those mysterious and scary things happen in their basement. I stumbled across a really scary video of ghost children playing in someone's basement. Take a look for yourself.
Elites, now that we've made travel so expensive, we have this hotel to ourselves. How'd you get here?
Kayak. They compared hundreds of travel sites to find a great deal on my flight, car, and hotel.
Kayak. Search one and done.
If this was me, I would never install a camera in the basement because I just don't want to know what's going on down there. But going back to the video, that was pretty creepy, so let's move on. Pet alligator bites its way into number 9. I've heard of a lot of people like to keep their pets in their homes, and sometimes they're kept in the basement. Why? I don't know. But this family isn't normal. On January of 2016, a repairman discovered a 6-foot, 200-pound alligator in the basement of a suburban home in Chicago. The alligator was their secret pet, who was sometimes taken out of his cage and put in the backyard. They had this alligator for 26 years without anyone ever knowing. The repairman was obviously stunned when he saw this monster alligator in the basement, so he called the police. They were able to remove the alligator, and the homeowners were charged with unlawful possession of an endangered species. I mean, is this real life right now? If I had an alligator in my basement, okay, actually let's stop it right there, because I would never have an alligator in my basement. But if I did, I would be fearing for my life every single day. I don't got time for that. I don't care that he's in a cage. They have insanely strong jaws that can easily break through like the little fencing. I think I would rather have a dog or a rabbit as a pet and not a man-eating machine. I'm just gonna put that out there. Giant torpedo fires in at number 8. It's normal for a lot of people to store their belongings in the basement, right? Well, apparently the previous homeowners was really into weapons of mass destruction because a family discovered that they had a torpedo in their basement. How did the realtor miss this one? Oh, don't look over there. Buy this house because of this part of the basement is safe. This is the good part of the basement. Well, they were a little skeptic that this thing was authentic, so they had a consultation with an army veteran who told them that it was used with either a motor or a lightweight anti-tank weapon, and that it was live. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but it is time to grab your kids, grab your wife, and get the heck out of there. Eventually, an explosive ordnance disposal unit came in to remove the deadly bomb. This is why you should get your house inspected, before you buy it, because there might be a potential missile in your basement. Okay, it's not likely that this will ever happen to you guys, but let's move on into number 7, and this takes us over to creepy skeletons in the basement. The internet broke when a story about a creepy looking skeletons were found in a basement under an orphanage in London. These scary looking creatures looked like dead fairies, werewolves, and aliens that were preserved in glass jars. Imagine seeing this. Their flesh had been rotting away, and some of their wings were nailed to a display board. To make things even scarier, there was also sketches of the Jack the Ripper victims next to the real human heads and other organs that were well preserved. These nightmare objects were discovered by a bunch of construction workers who were doing some repairs on the home. They found several thousand small wooden boxes that were tightly sealed. So imagine how shocked they were when they first opened up the box. These extremely creepy corpses belonged to Thomas Theodore Maryland, who was known as a prominent biologist in the 1800s. If I was working that day, I would run out of the house so damn fast, I would probably beat Usain Bolt in a race. And I would definitely ask to never work in basements ever again. It would be in my contract. So it looks like here you don't want to work in any basements. Why? Yeah, you don't want to know. A secret room makes its way into number 6. In 2015, a man bought a house for a really good bargain because the previous house owners had passed away and the house was slightly run down. After 2 weeks since he moved in, he decided to do some cleaning in the basement. That's where he went wrong. There was a lot of junk left over from the previous owners, and when he went to move a piece of plywood, he discovered that there was a secret hidden room. If you guys found a secret hidden room in your basement, would you guys go check it out? I know for me the answer is hell no. At this point he was a little bit scared to go in the room, but he decided to take a look around. He immediately saw a bunch of gun boxes that had been emptied and a safe that wasn't able to open. On the next day of exploring, he found a lot of ammunition and other military related items. During his search in this creepy secret room, he told the internet that he hired a locksmith who would be coming in the next day to open the safe and that he would update his blog with whatever he discovers. However, he never did update them. He disappeared for a couple of years and just recently posted an update saying he said that he experienced some strange events and he no longer lives in the house and has no intentions of telling anyone what he found in that safe. So I don't know what was in there, but if I found something scary, I wouldn't tell no one either. Locked in at number 5 is an underground prison. This story shocked the world when Ariel Castro was arrested for keeping these women imprisoned as sex slaves, and he kept them in prison for over a decade in his basement. Each of these women were kidnapped after they accepted a ride from him. This is why you don't take a ride from strangers. He drove them to his house, lured them inside, then he took them to the basement and restrained them. They forced them to use plastic toilets that weren't emptied often. They were fed only one meal a day and they could only shower twice a week. The girls kept diaries of their horrific experience, and they would talk about the abuse, being locked in a dark room, chained to a wall, and someday returning to their families. On May the 8th, 2013, he was charged with 4 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of rape. He pleaded guilty and took a plea bargain, so he was sentenced to life plus 1,000 years in prison without the possibility of parole. But 1 month into his sentence, he actually committed suicide by hanging himself with bed sheets in his prison cell. Teenage boy held captive in a basement sadly comes onto this list at number 4. Armando de Andrade disappeared when he was only 16 years old, but he was discovered by police 20 years later. He was being held captive for 20 years in the basement of his father and stepmother. There were no windows or light fixtures, and when police found him, he had a beard that has grown down to his knees. He also had very long fingernails, severely malnourished, and was extremely traumatized. Can you imagine living in pitch black? Okay, so for example, like kind of right now, I'm a little bit scared filming this video right now, guys. I couldn't imagine living 20 years like this. I mean, it's extremely dark right now. You guys can barely see me. I would definitely go insane. I think this is worse than solitary confinement. I would be freaking out. So you know what? Let's turn the lights back on. Okay, that's a lot better. The police chief said that when they entered the basement, they were initially searching for drug gang members, but they stumbled upon Armando. The basement floor was covered in human feces, and the poor boy was very impaired and wasn't able to speak. It is believed that his parents decided to lock him up in the basement because they started to heavily drink alcohol, and they told his friends that they moved to another part in Brazil and that he's doing good. After he was rescued, he was taken to a psychiatric hospital in hopes that he can recover from this traumatizing event.
The police discovered 36-year-old Armando Bezerra de Andrade when they were on a drug raid Sunday evening. They accidentally entered a family home and discovered Andrade in a filthy, stinking basement.
Number 3 brings us to the basement murderer. Gary Michael Heidnik kidnapped, tortured, and raped 6 women, killing 2 of them while holding them prisoners in his basement in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Going back to November 25th, 1986, he abducted a woman, and by January 1987, he had kidnapped 4 other women. He held them all captive in the pit of his basement, where they underwent extremely violent forms of torture. One of the women died from a combination of starvation, torture, and an untreated fever. He dismembered her body and put her arms and legs in his freezer and labeled them as dog food. According to some rumors, he would ground up his first victim's flesh, mix it with dog food, and feed it to the other girls. His favorite form of torture was using electrical shocks, and he used to duct tape their mouths and stab them in their ears with a screwdriver. Once he was finally arrested, he tried to take an insanity plea, but thankfully he was sentenced to death by lethal injections. So we don't have to worry about this, crazy guy ever again. The House of Horror terrifies us in at number 2, Joseph Fritzl. Well, he appeared to be a well-respected family man and successful engineer. But what a lot of people didn't know was he began to abuse his 11-year-old daughter and decided to keep her locked up in his basement away from the outside world. He made his own large cellar basement underneath his home that had a reinforced door and soundproofing. That's where his daughter lived, without any daylight for the next 24 years. During her imprisonment, she was raped by her father over 3,000 times. She gave birth to 7 children, 7 incests. So I guess they became her siblings and her children at the same time. Yeah, confusing. 3 of those kids lived upstairs with him and his wife, while the others lived in the basement cellar. The last child died shortly after childbirth, but in April 2008, one of the daughters became seriously ill, so he was persuaded to take her to the hospital, where she managed to call the police. Joseph was jailed for life, and his house of horrors has now been turned into 10 bungalow homes with the basements filled in with concrete. And in at number 1, we have a shadow person. A security guard was petrified when he heard a loud banging noises coming from the basement of a deserted football stadium. He decided to go down the dark staircase in order to investigate the suspicious noises, and he recorded the whole thing. When he panned his camera around, he saw a dark, shadowy figure quickly passing along some benches and then disappearing through the wall. And yeah, we have the footage for you guys. Take a look at this.
Tasha was an unstoppable force, juggling teaching, parenting, and part-time studies, until chronic fatigue from type 2 diabetes drained her energy. She worked with Crystal Run Healthcare to find a treatment plan that could keep up with her dynamic life. Now, thanks to comprehensive care and continuous glucose monitoring, Tasha is back to living life on her own terms. Watch Tasha's story at crystalrunhealthcare.com/Tasha. The people of Crystal Run Healthcare, changing healthcare, changing lives.
I mean, come on, is this real life right now? The security guard didn't see this ghostly figure until after he reviewed the tapes. He said that the basement changing room door was being violently opened and closed by an unknown force inside of the room. The man was so terrified and stressed, so on the next day, he handed in his letter of resignation and found a different security job. You know what? Smart man. I would do the same thing if I were you, because hell no, I'm not doing that job.
Pretend we have Samara's death hole. I am talking about the movie The Ring, but I will admit that sounded a bit suspicious. Firstly, I want to say that I absolutely love Reddit. Reddit is like an endless source of scary information from real people, so thank you Reddit, and thank you humans for contributing. Honestly, I don't know where Most Amazing Top 10 would be without Reddit. So in 2016, Colintendo posted on Reddit to say, I have the ring in my basement, and looking at the pictures, it literally looks like they do. They found a well under a trap door under 2 cement blocks. They lifted up the blocks and hello creepy death hole. Like seriously, who died down there? People on Reddit were freaked out. The post got over 8,000 upvotes. After all of the attention the hole got on Reddit, Colintendo gave us an update. They said, a friend told me I should throw a lifelike doll down there to show the kids when they act up. This is what happened when little Johnny wouldn't eat his vegetables. I think that's cruel. He also said, for visibility it is 8 feet deep, 4 feet filled with water. There is nothing else down there, no holes, no copeland pipes, no gates to hell. It's just a hole with water, nowhere to explore or spelunk. Still though, creepy hole in the basement. I don't like it. And something about the stone. Creepy. This person who found this hole had a premonition that it even existed long before they found it. Coming in at number 9, we have the railroad hole. This is an insane story. Imagine moving into a home and always having a weird feeling about your property. Alexandra Poulos of Lansdowne, Pennsylvania said she always knew there was something going on in her house that she didn't yet know about. She said she felt a presence. While her basement started breaking, she was very stressed, but when it opened up to reveal a massive hole, she was thoroughly creeped out. Long story short, she dug deeper into the hole and found a room 14 feet below. When they dropped a ladder down, they discovered that the room was actually part of an old underground railroad. Now Poulos is investigating the history of the space and making structural repairs. She's convinced that there's a spiritual presence and she wants to know the full story. Are there ghosts of the railroad underneath her house coming out through a hole? What a sentence. Coming in at number 8, we have the sinkhole. In 2013, a man in Norwood, Cincinnati woke up to discover a 40-foot sinkhole in his basement. The hole was 10 feet wide and 40 feet deep. It seems like something had gone pretty wrong, obviously. Sinkhole. Honestly, have a look at it. This is what the homeowner had to say.
I mean, everything. Everything I had that was worth value is gone.
The house ends up being purchased off the owner by the city, who tore it down to repair the hole, so I guess it's kind of a silver lining, although they did lose out on their house for a while. Coming in at number 7, we have the Mirelurks. In 2019, the Ace of Finland posted this scary looking hole on Reddit's urban exploration subreddit. They simply wrote, we found a deep hole filled with water in the basement of an abandoned factory, and well, I mean, that is a pretty accurate description. This actually looks like a Tomb Raider level filled with Harpoon Doom. Do you remember when you'd make Lara Croft swim down the spooky holes? Others said it looked like a place that would be full of Mirelurks from Fallout. One commenter wrote, seems like the beginning of a horror movie. Pair of explorers in an abandoned building stumble upon this flooded basement. Just as they turn around to leave, something grabs them by the ankle. Right? Coming in at number 6, we have this mystery hole. A YouTube video uploaded in December 2011 shows a guy investigating a very strange hole in his basement floor. At first, he shows the hole with the camera, it's covered over, but then he opens it up and pokes the camera down there, and it does look very deep indeed.
Yeah, so I guess I'll probably go down there eventually. But I don't know. It's kind of a small hole. so definitely a bigger person.
Like, we never actually get to the bottom of this spooky hole, and I would straight up freak out if this was in my home, because what's down there? Also, would you not worry about this damp open space being underneath your house? Like, I wouldn't structurally feel good about that, let alone the ghosts and ghouls. Coming in at number 5, we have the doorway to the abyss. 4 years ago, Gibbsman posted on R Creepy on Reddit. They simply wrote, "The hole in my basement," and then shared a link to this Imgur horror. Can you even imagine? To me, this looks like the lair of the Mothman or something. Some of the comments are reasonably on point. Max Powers 8988 said, "Sit in there with no lights on for 30 minutes while you conduct an EVP session." Another commenter said, this is Mr. Buzz Killington, they said, "You're that guy in the horror films that would insist that everyone stay together with the lights on, and if anything weird happened, you would just pack your bags and get into the car and drive back to Florida instead of wandering into the strange dark places alone." Exactly, I kind of feel what they're saying here, like, get in the hole or don't post a picture of it. Coming in at number 4, we have this very holy hole. Imagine finding a hole in your basement and then discovering it leads to an underground chapel that's been hidden for 100 years. I mean, I don't feel good about that. People do not have secret underground chapels for good reasons, do they? It's always like secret praying or ritual sacrifice or satanic cults. Here's a picture of Gareth amid the original hole, and here he is in the room at the end of it. Honestly, that crumbling cross on the floor really freaks me out. I don't like it. Coming in at number 3, we have the spider hole. Okay, I don't know what I dislike more, spiders or holes, but spiders that live in holes, that really takes the biscuit. With that in mind, this really is one of the most horrifying basements I've ever seen. Posted on R Creepy on Reddit by Uncle Drunky in 2018, they simply wrote, "The basement of a house I visited today," and then they posted this picture. I mean, can you even imagine? This is one big giant spider hole. I've never seen such thick cobwebbing in my whole life, and this is outrageous. Once again, I do love Reddit for the everyday stories shared and the everyday comments from everyday people who just make really good points. Blake Major said there is a 90% chance a human-sized spider is lurking down there. Honestly, I think you're right. Dank Fisherman said, "But you might get some epic loot for defeating it." That's true, but still, it wouldn't be enough for me. Coming in at number 2, who is Isaiah? It really isn't just the hole that is the scary thing in this basement. In 2015, a man and his brother discovered a horrible secret at a basement of an unoccupied home in Michigan. The siblings were house hunting when they entered the basement of a vacant property, only to be greeted with scary messages. Of the worrying scrawl on the walls was a set of creepy rules for somebody by the name of Joshua. They read, 1. Stop reading your walls. 2. No watching Isaiah through the hole. 3. No writing or drawing on the walls. 4. If you don't like these rules, go to number 0. There isn't a number 0 though, but really that isn't the point. For me, the worrying thing is wrapped up in number 2. No watching Isaiah through the hole. I mean, hello creepy. It isn't clear which hole this is talking about, but there is a peephole, a bunch of peepholes drilled in the staircase, so maybe he was watching Isaiah through there. Also written on the walls was, "Stop watching me," so I've just about had enough of this creepy basement and the creepy holes. Finally, at number 1, this is a horrifying true story. We have the pit. This was truly awful. So Gary Michael Heidnik was a rapist and a murderer that kept abducted women chained up in a pit in his basement in North Philadelphia. Heidnik was given the name the People Collector as he abducted 6 African American women and held them prisoner in the pit. He killed 2 of them. One of them was electrocuted in a hole in the basement filled with water. Among his victims were Josephina Riviera, Jacqueline Askins, Agnes Adams, Sarah Lindsay, and Deborah Dudley. The latter 2 lost their lives in his house in the hellhole. Here is a horrible drawing of the pit. Honestly, how utterly vile. Luckily, Heidnik was apprehended and sent to jail. So guys, that was the top 10 scariest holes found in people's basements. Which did you think was the scariest? Let me know in the comments section down below.
Starting us off at number 10 is the underground city. I would be so chuffed if I found an underground city in my basement, or like, what great value for money. Real estate is steep these days, you guys. Underground city, we need that. Anyway, in Turkey back in 1963, a homeowner knocked down a wall in his basement to find a hidden room. And then another, and then another, and then a whole network of tunnels. AKA what turned into Derinkuyu, one of the most impressive archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Derinkuyu is an ancient multi-level underground proper city that could accommodate about 20,000 people and had a bunch of amenities too, like stables, cellars, chapels, apples, livestock, and even running water from an underground river. It's believed the underground city was used by Christians as protection during the Arab-Byzantine Wars. It had about 8 levels, and damn, what a find this is. Like, honestly, like, kudos to whoever the hell found that. Kudos to you. You probably sold that for like $1 billion. Probably more. I hope you're enjoying your life on an island somewhere in the Caribbean. I wish I was you. Coming in at number 9 is The Box. Lorne Kaplan founded the company Free Home Cleanup, which offers free home cleanout services for hoarders. During one case of major hoarding, he was cleaning out the basement workroom of a farmhouse built sometime in the 1800s located in Hartsdale, New York. As he was cleaning, Lorne found a bunch of cans of paint, of stain, spackle, and so forth, but one can stood out to him. Inside one of the cans, he found the ashes of a deceased family pet. Like, I know people keep their relatives' ashes, but I didn't know cremating and keeping your pet's ashes was a thing. But the worst part was the ashes weren't even the current owners', so whose pet's ashes were they? How long had they been there for? Was it a sad situation where the pet died naturally and they just couldn't bear to part with it? Or did they accidentally kill the pet and burn the body so no one would ever find out? Like, many things could have happened, and I need to know what happened. Number 8, we have the bunnies. Back in December of 2015 in Saukville, Wisconsin, 29 rabbits were found in the basement of an abandoned, rundown barn. They were all in cages in horrible conditions, and one of them was even found just dead in its cage. Thankfully, the Wisconsin Humane Society removed all the rabbits, and after being examined, it was concluded that all of them had some kind of general or respiratory infection. Almost all of them also had scabs on their bodies and severe hair loss, meaning they had been neglected for a while in this dark environment. Sadly, there was little to no hope of finding the person who owned the barn or put the rabbits there because they were long gone by then, but thankfully all the bunnies became adoptable after intensive caring and healing, so yay. I mean, there's a happily ever after, and thank God, because I was about to slap a because we do not abuse animals, not under my arch, no, not ever. Filling our number 7 slot is the renovation. Now, a few years ago, a woman living in Wisconsin decided to renovate her entire home, as you sometimes do. What had been bugging her for ages was the basement, so she decided to start with that first. When contractors came and started digging it up, they made a startling discovery. Hundreds and hundreds of human remains, including children's skulls, were found there, and the woman probably wanted to evaporate into the ground at that point. And I mean, fair enough, I would too. Turns out her house was built on top of an old burial ground, and the remains were nearly 2 centuries old, so thankfully she was in the clear. With that being said, all the renovations had to stop, and it took her 15 months to get approval from the State Historical Society before restarting them. Honestly, damn, imagine wanting to renovate your house then finding a graveyard. Like, how does one even react to that? I know I'm smiling, but I'm not smiling on the inside. Now at number 6 is the utter snakery, and truly, honestly, you guys, the couple in this story got so snaked by life, I feel so bad for them. So back in 2009, a couple had just bought a home in Rexburg, Ohio, and were super excited about it because yay, new house, new life, new chapter, God knows what. But either way, their excitement was very short-lived. Within the first few weeks, they started finding a lot of snakes in their backyard, which he just couldn't understand. The area itself barely had any, so why were there so many in their yard alone? The couple also started hearing noises from under their floors and inside their walls, so they decided to investigate. They ended up removing a panel of sliding in their basement and were probably hoping to God they spoke parcel tongue when they saw what was inside. Dozens and dozens of snakes just started coming out of their wall, and oh, I just feel like they're on me. I don't like it, I don't like the feeling, and that's not even the worst bloody part. The couple also had a problem with their water system because it just tasted very oniony when it came out, and they came to find out that was from the snakes exuding this musk when they get scared. Well, A, BRB while I gag, and B, their only option was to either live there or spend $100,000 removing the nest, so they filed for bankruptcy and moved the hell out. Can you imagine? That just sucks so bad. Imagine buying a house, finding like a snake labyrinth, and being like, oh, well, guess we're on the streets now. Coming in at number 9 are the Cups. This is another horror story coming from Lorne Kaplan, our resident free home cleanup guru. He agreed to clean out the basement section of an old 3-story apartment in a fairly rundown neighborhood, so already we're expecting the worst here. Either way, he was thrilled to find the basement in pretty good condition, aka there was just not that much trash or litter on the ground, so I mean, the situation was workable. It makes it bearable at least. Anyway, all that excitement went down the bloody drain when he opened the cupboards and found 30 odd teacups filled with dead cockroaches. And it wasn't even that they all accidentally just died and fell into the teacups. Like, no, the owner was collecting dead cockroaches and storing them in these teacups in the basement. That is disgusting. Like, I can't. Like, if I was Lorne and someone wanted me to clean that and never warned me about that, I'd be so pissed. Like, the disrespect. Put some respect on my name. I'm done. I'm not even Lorne Kaplan. At number 4 are the teeth. This is the last one from Lorne on our list, but honestly, thank you for your service, and I'm sorry you had to see any and all of this. Now with this case, Lorne was in New Jersey cleaning out a home for an elderly woman whose husband had recently died. He was making his way through the house and then finally got to the basement, which was filled with cardboard boxes, which was pretty standard. As he was going through them, he found one that rattled around quite a bit, so he opened it up. Inside, he found dozens and dozens of dentures, loose teeth, and bridges. First of all, again, BRB while I gag, and secondly, the cherry on top was that they weren't the woman's or her late husband's. So whose freaking teeth were they? Why were they there? Whose are they? When were they are they dental records from people who were killed? Like, I need answers. Why is there a box of teeth in this woman's house? Whose teeth are they? Filling our number 3 slot is the doll. Now this one was shared by someone on Reddit who said this doll was discovered in the basement of an estate sale. The doll is really not what you'd imagine. It's extremely pale, the face and body is that of an old Asian woman, which is just weird in and of itself. You don't usually see an old doll at all. On top of that, the expression of the doll is just one of anguish, and it's just unsettling. Her teeth aren't all there, and her 2 index fingers were broken off as well. Like, at this point, I'd really prefer Annabelle over this. Like, I'm not doing this. She was found in a very tightly secured black box that was even tied up, indicating whoever had had her beforehand really wanted the box to remain shut. Now the user claimed there was a name carved into the back of the doll's neck, and other users started commenting, daring the user to say the name into a mirror thrice to see what would happen. I don't know if they ended up doing it or not, but maybe don't listen to trolls on Reddit trying to get you killed. Just, you know, a little word of advice. Now at number 2 is The Lady. Posted by Redditor Robinson217 2 years ago, they shared that they used to volunteer with their local police department, and one day they found something equally disgusting and really sad. They raided a house that had been suspected to be abandoned for quite a while, and that a squatter was now maybe living inside of it. Now they cleared the ground floor and found nothing, and so they made their way to the basement. In the basement, they found the old lady who had owned the house, except she was dead. And not only was she dead, but her little dog had eaten her entire face. Like, the skin from her hairline to her jawline to both her ears, like, it was all gone. Thankfully, her eyeballs were still in the sockets, but other than that, it was just a skeleton in clothes. Honestly, I would have stopped volunteering at that point. Some things you just can't unsee. I wasn't even there, but I can't unsee that. And finally, at number 1 is the poem. This was shared by Reddit user Gizmo588, who said they used to live in an old house in the middle of nowhere in North Dakota. But when they first moved in, the user was exploring the house and went into the bedroom in the basement that was going to be theirs. Honestly, I'd be so pissed if my parents moved into a house and I got a bedroom in the basement. Like, no! I deserve better. Either way, in the bedroom they found a hand-painted poem in dark reddy brown paint that said, "I wrote a little poem. I wrote it on my wrist. I wrote it with a blade. I wrote it with a twist." Now if you don't get it by now, the person wrote that poem with his own blood. Turns out the user found out that the previous owner had committed suicide in the backyard of the house by cutting his wrists, and before him, an elderly couple had died in the house as well. And I'm sure you can imagine that family did not stay in that house very long after that, I assure you.
Coming into number 10, we have Samara's Well. Have you guys seen the movie The Ring? If so, wouldn't you run and hide as far as you possibly could away from this basement? I mean, In 2015, Reddit user Colintendo shared a link to his Imgur saying, "I have the ring in my basement." And on closer inspection, yeah, he does. That's the ring's well right there in the basement. I mean, I would say, Colin, get out of there, bro, or she probably will come and kill you in 7 days. Coming into number 9, we have a whole kitchen. How well off do you have to be to discover an entire servant's kitchen in your house that you'd never even noticed until now? I mean, seriously, this is quite the discovery. This is is exactly what happened to Archie and Philippa Graham Palmer as they explored their property in Wales. Graham Palmer, I mean, they sound rich, don't they? Archie said that the basement had been a dumping ground for years, and it is thought that the room lay unused for 100 years. Imagine having that much living space. Oh my goodness. The kitchen was found behind some old junk and was left virtually untouched, with pots and pans still on the walls and cookbooks on the shelves. From a kitchen in a basement to the basement of a restaurant with a sick sense of humor. At number 8, we have a creepy gathering of dolls. Redditor Gravity Boy posted, "Found this in the basement of a restaurant I went to last night." Now the restaurant in question turns out to be Hanny's in Phoenix, Arizona. One fellow Redditor looked at the picture and said, "It looks like Annabelle's reunion," which to be honest it totally does. It turns out that this is an art installation, but I really wouldn't want to be the one that interrupts this illicit miniature game of craps. I also hear that the restaurant has very interesting toilets in this location, but the dolls really freak me out. Coming into number 7, we have a 150-year-old signed photo of Abraham Lincoln. Can you imagine cleaning out your grandmother's basement to discover signed photographs of one of America's most famous presidents? On top of that, it was in an album with photos of other senators and cabinet members, and there were signatures. This is a piece of American history right here. So this is exactly what happened to a woman who appeared on British TV show The Antiques Roadshow. Presenter Wes Cowan valued the album at, wait for it, $100,000, which is a pretty big basement find. Coming into number 6, we have a priceless art piece. A dusty old painting was found in a basement of a deceased elderly couple in New Jersey in 2016. The small painting was just 9 inches tall and was discarded as worthless, but it actually turned out to be a painting by celebrated Dutch artist Rembrandt. The painting, called The Unconscious Patient, was spotted by 2 eagle-eyed art dealers and sold for $870,000 at auction, which actually is very, very cheap for a Rembrandt, which have traditionally been going for millions. Imagine $870,000 in your basement. Whew. The painting dates back to the mid-1600s and has since been put on display at the Getty Museum. Coming into number 5, we have a 90-kilo alligator. In 2016, an alligator was discovered living in a basement by a repairman who was working in a man's house in Lansing, Illinois. The gator had apparently been living down there for 26 years when he was discovered. I mean, imagine keeping an alligator in your basement for 26 years. The reptile belongs to Charles Price, who said that he walked it in his garden and fed it chicken breast. The gator had grown to 6 feet long when he was discovered by the worker. He was later seized and taken to an animal shelter, but like, imagine being the repair guy going down to someone's house and finding a gator in their basement. Seriously. Anyone for severed puppet heads at number 4. Hurrah! So this is another Reddit classic. A Redditor posted that they found this horrifying array in their basement behind the furnace. Some of you may say, how did they not know that this was behind the heater? But some people on this list had no idea they were housing a full kitchen, so here we have an array of disembodied puppet heads tied together with strings. Hip hip hooray for the person who constructed this to scare the living bejesus out of future residents. Oh, great! At number 3, we have a mass grave. When new owners of a home formerly resided in by Benjamin Franklin moved in, they found the grim discovery of 1,200 bone fragments in the soil below their basement. The house on Craven Street in London had fragments of bone dating back to the exact time when Benjamin Franklin lived there in the 1700s. It turns out that one of the founding forefathers of America wasn't a murderer, he just let this house be used as a secret anatomy school at the time. Back then dissecting bodies was illegal, so it was all in the name of science, which I can respect. Coming into number 2, this is really sad actually, we have prisoners and kidnap victims. It's really horrible, but often sickos use their basements to keep people captive. Often their hostages go unnoticed for sometimes decades. So this is exactly what Joseph Fritzl did. When she was just 18, Joseph Fritzl lured his daughter into the basement of their home in Austria and kept her there for 24 years. Unbeknownst to her, he had been building a secret lair to trap her in. To get to the cell in which his daughter Elizabeth was trapped in, Fritzl or anyone looking for the secret space had to cross 5 locked rooms. The cell had 2 sleeping areas, basic cooking functions, and a bathroom. Elizabeth gave birth to 7 children down there and was eventually discovered when one of the children fell ill and was allowed to go out to hospital. When police raided the home, they made the grim discovery in the basement. So I just wanted to end off this list with a really really happy one at number 1, so this is good. Yeah, I know there have been things that have been valued at more, but imagine making this discovery. At number 1, we have $23,000 of cold hard cash discovered in a basement. A couple in Cleveland discovered $23,000 in cash hidden in a suitcase in the ceiling of their basement. The couple in their 30s were remodeling their home when they found the little green suitcase containing the money. The cash was dated between 1928 and 1934 and was found wrapped in wax paper with a newspaper article from the 1950s. The couple counted up all of the cash bundled into 20s and 50s and invested the money into their mortgage. I'm not sure that that's how I would spend a windfall of $23K. I don't know, how would you spend it if you suddenly found $23,000 in your house? What would you do with it?
Use Kayak to find the hotel you want at the price you want. Download the Kayak app now.
Starting us off at number 10 is Maple Hill Cemetery. Founded in 1822, this cemetery is the oldest and largest burial ground in the state, where roughly 80,000 people have been laid to rest. But with that many souls in one place, it only takes a matter of time before people start noticing something strange happening. While during the day, you may be spared from witnessing a horrifying spirit, it's said at night the tortured souls are unearthed, roaming the grounds in search of answers. Most unsettling is the park on the property, also known as the Dead Playground. Oh gee, that sounds inviting, don't you think? Apparently it's nicknamed that as many young people are buried in the area, and visitors brave enough to see for themselves what goes on claim that at night the trapped souls of the young can be seen playing around the park, while their creepy giggles echo throughout the grounds. But whatever you do, make sure you pay respect to Mary Bibb. If you knock on her mausoleum walls, she will reply with a gentle creak of her rocking chair buried inside. But if you forget to greet her, well, she just might haunt you forever. Coming in at number 9 is Fort Morgan. Said to be one of the most haunted places in all of Alabama, Fort Morgan is rife with ghoulish tales of ghosts and strange occurrences. The most notorious is that of a prisoner who's said to have died here in the early 1900s after he took his own life in the barracks. People say that if you walk past, you can still hear him crying out late at night. But he's not the only one you should fear. There's also a female spirit that wanders the grounds in search of justice after she too lost her life after being dragged into the fort and beaten to death by mysterious attackers who were never caught for the crime. Many believe she is an angry spirit with a vengeance who will torture any man who steps foot on the property. So if I were you, I'd skip this one. Next up at number 8 is Drish House. Once the home of Dr. John R. Marsh, a gambler and a drunk who built the estate in 1835 for his beloved bride Sarah. The couple lived in the home for 32 years until one day John had too much to drink for the last time and drunkenly tumbled over the stairway, falling to his demise. But you might be surprised that it's not his spirit that's trapped here, actually his wife Sarah. While no one knows for sure what keeps her soul trapped on the property, some say she was so traumatized after finding her husband dead in their home and wasn't able to recover. Others believe, however, that she refuses to leave because her family failed to honor her own funeral wishes, and so she remains, causing trouble to anyone who steps foot on the property to this day. While today the manor is used for many celebrations, Sarah remains, tormenting guests of the events, trying to get them to leave. If you're brave enough to visit, try looking up at the 3rd story tower. It says you can catch a glimpse of her up there. Just be careful she doesn't see you looking, or she may just follow you around the property, terrorizing you until you leave. Next up at number 7, the Old Bryce Hospital. There are few places in this world more haunted than an old abandoned mental health facility, and there is no denying that the torment that went on here is a huge reason as to why so many spirits remain haunting its grounds, seeking revenge. Built during the segregation segregation era of America, the building was branded as an insane asylum for those suffering from mental illnesses, when in reality, it was pretty much a work camp for able-bodied black people who were admitted under false pretenses and then forced into slave labor, working in the fields around the hospital. Shockingly, the facility remained open until 1977, and only closed due to new desegregation laws. It comes as no surprise that after years of abuse and inhumane living conditions suffered by the so-called patients, that people claim to have had strange experiences while visiting. Those who've dared to visit the abandoned hospital claim the souls are angry, and that as soon as you walk in, you can feel the air shift. Many report hearing strange noises, and some even claim to have seen shadowy figures lurking around every corner. Next up at number 6 is St. James Hotel. For whatever reason, hotels tend to be a pretty big hotspot for paranormal encounters, and the St. James Hotel is definitely a part of that phenomenon. Back in the day it was the first hotel operated by a black congressman, and despite having many years of success, it hit hard times in the late 1800s and was eventually forced to close its doors to the public. Fast forward about 100 years to 1997 and the hotel reopened, but this time something was off about the building. Something just wasn't right. During its century-long time as an abandoned building, it became a horrifying hub for lost souls, and I guess they decided to remain, haunting all those that dare stay the night. Visitors claim seeing full-bodied apparitions sitting at the bar, or witness lights shutting off out of nowhere. But most creepy of all was a recorded visit when a psychic research team was brought in, and they walked the grounds asking if anyone was there, but they never heard a response back. But later on, when they played the tapes, an older man's voice responded saying, "Well, that's a stupid question," making everyone in the room jump. So, what do you say? Are you brave enough to pay the ghosts a visit? Coming in at number 5, Cahaba Ghost Town. It likely comes as no surprise that a ghost town is also home to thousands of unsettling spirits, but few are more terrifying than Cahaba. Once the capital city of Alabama, it was abandoned after the Civil War when terrible flooding led to most of the buildings falling into complete disrepair, and so the citizens who survived were forced to leave for good. Today, nothing remains but the ruins of what used to be, including a church, a few cemeteries, and the Barker Mansion and its slave quarters. And I mean, that is just all the ingredients for a haunted ghost town if I've ever heard of one. Those that have tried to visit the once booming city recount that as soon as you enter the town's borders, cell service gets spotty and unreliable, only to be completely fine as soon as you step even 1 foot off the border of the town. While that alone might not scare visitors away, there are also countless reports of visitors witnessing terrifying apparitions and hearing the voices of the dead crying out at night for revenge. So visit at your own risk, but don't say I didn't warn you. Coming in at number 4 is the Boynton Oak. Of all the things that are usually haunted, like cemeteries, hospitals, churches, the last thing you'd likely expect to need to be afraid of was a tree. But trust me, this is no ordinary tree. The Boynton Oak is said to have grown from the grave of one Mr. Charles Boynton. As the legend goes, back in 1835, Charles was accused of friend Nathaniel Frost. Charles disputed the accusation and never once wavered from his alleged innocence. Still, he was found guilty for the crime and sentenced to execution as payback. But right before he was executed, he declared in front of everyone that a tree would spring forth from his grave as a proof of his innocence, and then they would all see that they had caught the wrong man. And shockingly, this is exactly what happened. Many claim that Charles's spirit haunts the tree above his grave, often freaking out those who come to visit. Even spookier is that some claim to have even seen him sitting under the tree waiting. But just who is he waiting for? No one knows exactly. Coming in at number 3 is Sloss furnaces. Once built as a means to access iron ore, coal, and limestone, the Sloss furnaces were far from a safe place to work. It's believed over the years at least 47 men lost their lives working at the furnaces due to the incredibly dangerous work conditions. But the most talked about is that of James Slag Wormwood, a former foreman of the furnaces known for being cruel to his employees and who died after slipping and falling into a pool of molten iron ore. Although there is rumor he may have been pushed by his workers, forced to the brink after his unending abuse. Still, after Wormwood's death, strange things started happening more and more frequently. Workers were seeing strange things, hearing strange noises, and started to feel like they were going crazy. Employees were being found injured or seen tripping and falling out of nowhere. Each of them recounted that an angry man covered in burns had tried to push them after screaming at them to get back to work. Then in 1971, a watchman encountered what he described as a half-man, half-demon who tried to push him up the stairs. After the watchman refused the spirit's advance, he was badly beaten by the entity until he fell unconscious. Later, while being examined, he was found to be covered in severe burns where he says he was beaten. So unless you're looking to be beaten up by an angry spirit and covered in burns from the blows, I might suggest a different place for your visit. Coming in at number 2 is Bear Creek Swamp. Even at the best of times, swamps give off spooky and creepy vibes, and this one might just be the worst of them all. Legend has it that many years ago, a woman's son went missing. Scared, the mother went looking for him in the nearby swamp, hoping that he had simply run away from home. But no matter how long she looked, she could never find him. It said she died in the swamp looking for him, and if you walk into the swamp today and say, "We have your baby," 3 times, she will come out of nowhere and attack you until you leave for good. And don't even try to come back after she's banished you. You might not be so lucky the second time around. And last up today in our number 1 spot is Sweetwater Mansion. Designed by war vet General John Brahan, this mansion was named after the nearby creek and first occupied by the general's son-in-law, Robert Patton. Under Patton's jurisdiction, the basement of the mansion served as a Civil War hospital and a county jail. And if that wasn't enough, it's said that at one point someone who lived in the mansion practiced dark magic, which thinned the veil between worlds. This would make sense considering just how many people have witnessed earth-shattering apparitions that sent them running for the hills. Most notably is the casket that contains a body of a Confederate soldier in one of the downstairs rooms that will suddenly disappear right in front of your eyes. It's believed that the casket is haunted by the spirit of original owner Robert Patton, whose funeral was held at the home and who was documented having an open casket ceremony. But that's not even the scariest part. There's a room on the property that routinely locks female visitors inside. In fact, it happens so frequently that caretakers of the property have avoided entering it at all costs. And if a self-locking door and a terrifying soldier ghost don't turn you off of the property, there is also a secret room on the property with no door. The only way to enter is by a small window, and it's believed that anyone who goes in will never escape. So if I were you, I'd skip this one.
At number 10, we have 36 degrees north, 117 degrees west, Death Valley, USA. One of the worst spots in America to get lost on a hiking trip. Now, thanks to air-conditioned cars and cell phones, most people won't meet their end in this wasteland. But back when pioneers had to cross this desert, it was one of the most challenging tasks imaginable. If you were caught out there without supplies, you would last less than a day. Either dehydration, sunstroke, or one of the many predators living out there would make you meet your end faster than a pizza pocket when I'm drunk. Death Valley has the highest recorded temperature on the planet, clocking in at 57 degrees Celsius. The whole joke about being hot enough to fry an egg on the sidewalk is real there, except it won't be an egg. It will be your intestines as a vulture rips them out of your stomach. And if you manage to make it through the day into the night, the temperature will plummet. In the winter, it can get as cold as -10 Celsius. As beautiful as the desert can be, I don't think I would want this to be my next vacation spot. If you're ever traveling through there, make sure you bring a ton of water and some blankets just in case your car breaks down. That would suck. At number 9, we have 25 degrees south, 153 degrees east, Fraser's Island, Australia. Australia is a beautiful place. It's like hot Canada with more fighting and beer. Honestly, I've never been there. I'm just basing it off of movies and TV. I'm really stereotyping you guys. I'm very sorry. But globally, Australia is known for housing some of the most dangerous creatures on the planet, and Fraser's Island is considered the most dangerous place in Australia. It's basically a funnel for several different dangerous species. To start it off, there are 2 types of jellyfish which are common to Fraser's Island: Irukandji and blue bottles. Both of those jellyfish have stings so severe that they will send you to the hospital. And if the waters weren't dangerous enough, this is also a hotspot for young great white sharks. I'm assuming they go to these beaches for biting practices. They want to get their reflexes nice and sharp before they chase down some surfers. So you might be saying to yourself, well, I'll just stay out of the water and I'll go explore the island. Well, there are packs of wild dingoes running around waiting to turn your tibia into a chew toy. Oh, and if you get attacked by any of these wild animals, there is 0 medical services on the island. So you better hope you don't bleed out fast while the helicopter is zooming you to save your life. At number 8, we have 12 degrees north, 57 degrees east, Danakil Desert, Ethiopia. We're jumping back into the heat, and with winter just around the corner, this place makes me kind of jealous. I know that temperatures in deserts are high enough to kill someone, but I think it might be nicer than having to wait for a bus in the snow. Anyways, the Danakil Desert, also known as the Danakil Depression, is one of the hottest places on the planet, and because of its extreme heat, it's home to natural wonders. First, there is a decent amount of volcanic activity. This might be one of the only places on Earth where you walk into the desert to cool off. There's also mysterious salt pools. These are one of the largest tourist attractions in the area. Salt deposits build up on the sides of these pools, and the water is packed with sulfur. The salt has the aesthetic of a rimmed glass straight from nature's cocktail lounge. However, don't drink from one of these pools unless you want a slow, painful death. And I think we can agree we're all looking for swift and numb when it comes to dying. The pools are extremely poisonous. Even the air just above the pools is so packed with carbon dioxide that when small animals get too close, they will suffocate and die. And here's the cherry on top of the sundae, this place is nicknamed the Gateway to Hell. Wow. Beautiful. At number 7, we have 37 degrees north, 59 degrees east, Fukushima, Japan. For anyone who is unaware why Fukushima is a place you do not want to visit, it is home to the 2nd largest nuclear disaster ever. In 2011, a major earthquake hit Fukushima, damaging a power plant, causing the city to evacuate. Since then, no one has been allowed to return, and the situation has improved, but it is not looking great. In order to keep the core cool of this power plant that melted down, they are constantly pouring water on top of them. This water is then contaminated with radiation, obviously, and they must contain it so it doesn't spread. But they are running out of places to put this contaminated water. Also, the city is now overgrown with vegetation. With the absence of people, the forests have started to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. And with it has brought a little bit of wildlife. I talked about this in a previous video, but I wanted to mention again because this is actually crazy. Radioactive wild boars have come into Fukushima and are thriving. For whatever reason, they do not seem to be afraid of radiation, and they are staking their claim on the land. This is how monster movies start. Next thing you know, we're gonna have giant mutant pigs swimming across the Pacific Ocean, coming here to eat the West. At number 6, we have 2 degrees south, 36 degrees east, Lake Natron, Tanzania. From a distance, this lake seems like a bronze wonder. The color and stillness looks like something pulled right out of a travel magazine. But this is the last lake you would want to take a swim in. There is only 3 things that have managed to live in this lake. 1 species of fish, 1 type of flamingo, and some algae. Everything else that touches this water dies extremely fast. Why is that? Well, the pH in the lake can sit around 9 and sometimes stretch up to 10.5. The animals that call this place home have adapted to the harsh conditions. But let's say a bird unfamiliar with the area decides to take a dip. Their eyes and skin will be burned from the high pH levels, and the ending result will look like they've been hit with Medusa's gaze. At number 5, we have 44 degrees south, 71 degrees west, Mount Washington, USA. Alright, we did a couple places in the excruciating heat, and now it's time to head into the bitter cold. Mount Washington is freezing, and it has temperatures that can reach 40 below. Fun fact about 40 below, that's where the 2 scales of Celsius and Fahrenheit meet. You can share that with your friends next time you're freezing to death in the -40 weather. I'm sure they'll love that little tidbit of information while their nose peels off. And if the brutal cold wasn't enough to make you want to avoid this place, it also has the fastest winds ever recorded on a mountain, 238 miles per hour. That's over 300 kilometers per hour. That's stronger than a Category 5 hurricane. The wind is so strong it will give your face freezer burn right before it rips it off and sends it hurling down the mountain. At number 4 on the list, we have 24 degrees south, 46 degrees west, Snake Island, Brazil. I didn't make this place up. I know it sounds like something pulled out of a cheesy low-budget 80s action movie, but it's real, and it has enough snakes living there to make the cast of The Real Housewives for decades. There is one snake for every square foot. I don't have a fear of snakes, but there's still no way I'm going to get close to this place, especially since almost every species on the island is extremely venomous. There's even rumors that snakes will swim off the island to boats that are too close and kill the people on board and then eat them. I even heard there's a symbiotic relationship with the birds on the island and the snakes on the island, where the birds will pick up the snakes and then drop them on people who are on the island so they get like an air attack and kill them. That one I made up. I just kind of wanted to hype up the story a little bit more. But your real biggest worry is about getting bitten and then having to ride in a boat back to the mainland to go see a doctor. It's a 90-kilometer trip, so you would probably be dead before you got anywhere close to any sort of medical attention. At number 3, we have 3 degrees north, 98 degrees east, Sinabung Volcano, Indonesia. I mean, who wouldn't want to live right next to an active volcano? It seems like a swell place to raise a family. But you guys are probably wondering, well, you can live next to an active volcano, but that doesn't mean it's gonna blow up all the time. Well, between the years 2010 and 2016, Sinabung has popped off 5 times in 6 years. That is crazy. This place has blown up more times in 6 years than Conor McGregor has fought. And he is a professional fighter. I hope he doesn't find me and kick my ass. I don't know, that could happen. I'm sure it's a beautiful place, but it would be hard to tell with all the constant lava flowing through it. This volcano is part of the Ring of Fire, which is a string of volcanoes lining up with tectonic plates that erupt more often than usual. So I'm not eager to check this place out, but you guys can go for me. At number 2, we have 25 degrees north, 70 degrees west, the Bermuda Triangle. Any kid growing up in the 90s heard about the Bermuda Triangle again and again. It was a plot point in every show from Scooby-Doo to Jackie Chan's Adventures. Yo, remember Jackie Chan had a cartoon and it was absolute fire? That cartoon was so good. Anyways, the Bermuda Triangle is a large chunk of the Atlantic situated between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, and has been a hotspot for people disappearing. Planes, boats, rescue missions all have vanished without a trace, and it leaves people baffled as to what is going on. Some people think it's a hotspot for storms to kick up, other people say there's magnetic forces that destroy navigation equipment. The crazier theories suggest that the Bermuda Triangle is a gateway for interdimensional travel, that aliens use this to fly across the universe in an instant. Even though there's a lot of disappearances from this area, many of them have been explained, but there's still a ton of cases that leave people wondering what's going on in this mysterious chunk of ocean. I don't know why I did that tongue thing at the end. And number 1 on our list is 40 degrees north, 58 degrees east, the Darvaza gas crater, Turkmenistan. Right off the bat, this place is nicknamed the Door to Hell. It has an even creepier nickname than that other hell place. Not the place you want to spend your honeymoon, unless you're both super metal, then it's probably like a great choice. Turkmenistan has a massive natural gas reserve, and that has been the fuel to the door to hell. It was back in 1971 when Turkmenistan was still part of the Soviet Union. There was construction underway, and a drilling operation caused a large amount of the earth to collapse in. And what started flowing out of it? A toxic gas. If it wasn't dealt with quickly, it would have poisoned the entire area. Good news though, the gas was flammable, so the Soviets figured, we'll just light it on fire, it'll burn for a little while, and then we'll get back to work, comrade. Well, it did catch on fire, and then it did burn, but it never stopped. It has been burning since 1971, and has no sign of going out anytime soon. And if a giant pit of fire wasn't enough to keep you away, Turkmenistan is run by a dictator. Have a nice vacation.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Koh Lip Island. I'll be honest, this is a place that, despite the spooky tales, is probably still on many people's travel destinations list because it is so beautiful. Like much of Thailand, it truly is seemingly idyllic. When it comes to the haunting scene here, we turn to those who inhabit the island, the Chow Lei people. They claim to share their island with the whole host of spirits that they call the Ha Tao. You would think that a ghost-filled island would keep people away, but they've found their own way to keep these spirits appeased, and that is by offering them strawberry pop and cupcakes. I mean, apparently it pays to be a spirit,
sounds pretty awesome. You get to chill on an island and you get poppin' cupcakes. Despite the incredible scenery and the amazing hospitality of those who are local to the island, many people report feeling some sort of uneasy presence on Koh Liep Island.
Number 9. Wat Sien Sook Hell Garden. Gardens are supposed to be peaceful. They're supposed to be a place to grow, reflect, swat bees for hours on end, all that good stuff. But when it comes to the Wat Sien Sook Hell Garden, you won't be finding any peace whatsoever. This one's a little odd, a little spooky. Thailand is very spiritual, and this specific garden is home to hundreds of sculptures, each depicting the horrors that are awaiting in Buddhist hell. Yeah, they're very scary to look at. Unlike other gardens in Thailand, this one was built quite recently, believe it or not. The Hell Garden was built in 1986. Now the idea is to keep you from committing any sins, and I gotta admit, they nailed it. Yeah, pretty much did the best they could. Olivia and I like to walk through graveyards for fun sometimes, so I don't know. I personally would love to walk through this. Would you do it?
In our number 8 spot today, we have Mae Ram Phung Beach. For this one, we are taking a trip to the eastern coast of Thailand to the Rayong province. Here lies this beach, which attracts tourists from all over the world. Earlier this year, the shores of this beach were actually hit with the results of an oil spill, but that isn't the most frightening thing that's happened here. Apparently, this area saw a few people who lost their lives in the water, and these horrible incidents happened quite close together. Since then, people have reported a sort of uneasy feeling as they visited the beach, and some have even claimed to have left feeling haunted and have not been able to shake the feeling.
Number 7. Koh Kam Noi Ghost Island. Love the name, Ghost Island. Really gets to the point for this next one here. I like it. Ghost Island, Koh Kam Noi, is located in the eastern Gulf of Thailand. Now, it's close to the Conburi province. There is a plethora of reasons why this island is for sure haunted. Let's list them. During World War II, American soldiers constructed a base on the island. The deep waters surrounding the islands made it a pretty ideal stop for large warships. Now, unfortunately, there were swarms of mosquitoes that were also sharing the same island. So a great amount of those soldiers died and had to be buried on Koh Nam Noi Island. Now, today, there's a Muslim cemetery on the one side and a Chinese cemetery on the other. All things considered, I couldn't imagine a more peaceful resting place.
In our number 6 spot today, we have Ayutthaya Historical Park. This national park is a place with incredibly rich history, and it is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The site was founded in 1350, and it became the second capital of Siam after Sukhothai. The site ended up being destroyed by the Burmese in the 18th century, but despite these ruins, even today you can still get the sense of how wonderful this place once was. With history like this, it's definitely no surprise that this place is said to be haunted. The most popular haunting story from this location is in regards to the ghost of Pu Sam Phao Sap, who is said to guard the city's treasures. Even Prince Bira of Siam reported seeing this ghostly apparition, and not many people can say that they have a royal backing them up when it comes to their paranormal claims.
Number 5. River Kwai Bridge.
GoDaddy is a partner that always puts you first. Start today at GoDaddy.com.
I don't like bridges in general. I have no idea how they work structurally. It freaks me out when I look at them and to think about them. When it comes to Hellfire Pass, no chance. Not gonna do that one. First of all, big fan of the name. These are all scary names. They hint towards the impending doom. I kinda like it. The River Kwai Bridge saw brutal combat during World War II, but the Death Railway alias actually comes from the dark history during the initial construction of the River Kwai Bridge, where a countless number of prisoners or tradesmen all lost their lives while laying the 260-mile-long track. The track runs from Thailand to Burma, and almost all of it is deemed haunted. So yeah, big note from me. Hard pass on this pass.
In our number 4 spot today, we have Tui Watana Deserted House. If you've seen Final Destination, the vibes that this spooky abandoned house is giving will definitely be a little familiar. Legend goes that a group of friends entered this house once to have a little fun in a place they probably shouldn't have been. You know, young people, everyone did stupid stuff, but it turns out there might be a higher price to pay when it comes to this place. Since then, it is said that this group of friends has seen members of the group dying in some strange or very elaborate circumstances. One passed away in a car accident, the other in a house fire. It is said that the remaining members of the group believes that they may have been the target of a vengeful spirit that was angry that they entered that house. I hope they all stay far away from roller coasters and tanning beds for sure, and maybe just don't drive behind any trucks carrying wood. just to be safe.
Number 3, the Southern Unique. Commonly referred to as, you guessed it, Ghost Tower, the Southern Unique is a colossal, unfinished skyscraper, and it's gonna stay that way for probably ever. Upon first glance, this looks like any city, right? Cranes sticking out of the building, there's scaffolding just waving like a flag in the wind, it's the usual. Now, not all these construction zones, however, have this many reports of paranormal activity. This building looks massive. You stare up from the streets of downtown Bangkok and you get the chills. Even though construction began in the 90s, the building still has not been completed post-financial crisis. Now, one major incident that deems the Southern Unique as haunted took place in December 2014. A photographer snuck into the building to take photos of the sunrise, but instead found the body of a Swedish man on the 43rd floor. It was determined that the man had sadly taken his own life.
In our number 2 spot today, we have the Biok Sky Hotel. The haunting tales of this location can be attributed to the significant number of workforce deaths that have been reported here. During the construction of this luxury hotel, it is said that 3 of the workers fell to their rather untimely deaths. Now, this sky-high tower is said to be haunted by the souls of those who fell. Both staff of the hotel as well as guests staying there have reported seeing things like shadows lurking through the hallways. It doesn't stop here, however. Some guests have even reported their items being moved seemingly on their own, and there's also been reports of just a general feeling of uneasiness, a feeling like they're being watched. It truly gives me shivers just thinking about it, but I'm sure stories like this only make this hotel more desirable for those interested in all things paranormal.
And finally, number 1, Bangpyew Shoe Factory. We'll finish this list off with an abandoned shoe factory located in Samut Prakan. The factory suffered this freak accident that sadly led to many casualties of workers. The air compressor malfunctioned in some way and ultimately it erupted. It was quite fast and very tragic, but the factory owner continued business afterwards anyways. Now, after that point, workers one by one ended up leaving. They were quitting their jobs on the spot, all claiming to have encountered the spirits of the previous workers who had lost their lives. Now, word spread quite fast, so business slowed down drastically. The owner as well sadly took their own life in the same factory. So it's no surprise that the building remains untouched still to this day.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Tower of London. Ah, the Tower of London, the scene of much betrayal and bloodshed. There aren't enough hours in the day to list the amount of ghosts said to haunt this royal fortress on the banks of the River Thames. The tower has been the prison and death spot of some of the most famous people in British history, including Henry VIII's wife Anne Boleyn. She is said to haunt the tower to this day. Also, haunting the tower are 2 young princes who were killed on the orders of Richard III. The 2 youngsters appear most frequently to other children who visit the tower on school trips. The most dramatic ghost of the Tower of London, though, is the ghost of the Countess of Salisbury. Now, she had a very grisly death there indeed. She broke free of her executioner, who instead of chopping off her head, hacked her up with an axe. She can be heard screaming and running riot in the castle's grounds. One tourist had a turn when she was on a guided tour of the tower. In one of the rooms used to imprison the former enemies of the crown, she simply had a breakdown. She started screaming, "There's so much suffering." Apparently the suffering can still be felt in the grounds today. On top of the human spectres, the tower is also said to be haunted by the ghost of a bear. A bear! Coming in at number 9, we have Screaming Montebello Castle. Montebello Castle is located in Switzerland near the border with Italy. Look at it, it is absolutely stunning. This castle was built in the 14th century, so it's had 6 centuries of history. The most enduring tale from the castle is the story of Gwendolina, an albino girl who lived in the castle and was kept there. Being an albino was socially scorned back in those days, and her mother tried to dye her hair with natural herbs to try and give it some colour, but it ended up turning blue, which earned her the nickname of Azarina. She was forbidden to leave the castle, and her father was ashamed of her. One day, under very mysterious circumstances, the girl was killed. Stories do vary as to exactly how, but they all involve her letting out a string of blood-curdling screams. Azarina died on the 21st of June 1375, but her screams can still be heard in the castle today, and are loudest during the summer solstice, the anniversary of her death. Coming in at number 8, we have Himeji Castle in Japan. Himeji Castle was built in the 1300s in a hilltop in the Hygo Prefect. Now, the beautiful castle is home to a dark legend and a wronged ghostly presence. The story goes that once a servant by the name of Okiku was accused of losing valuable crockery, and the loss of the dishes seemed to be reason enough for her to take her life. Okiku was dragged from the kitchen and thrown into a well in the castle grounds, where she died. It is said that her ghost still haunts the castle today. She is said to haunt both the grounds and the kitchen. She can be heard counting dishes while sobbing, and then when she gets to 9, she runs shrieking and shrieking back into the well. Coming in at number 7, we have the ghost of Tuileries Palace. There is a ghost of a red man spotted outside Tuileries Palace in Paris. Now, he was said to be a local butcher. Others say he was a henchman of the 16th century queen, Catherine de Medici. Both legends agree that his name was Jean and that the queen had him killed because he held way too many secrets. A while after his death, a man was spotted in blood-red attire wandering the gardens. One man who spoke to his ghost, Whil, reported that Jean swore vengeance to the queen and the crown, and the Kingdom of France. Aristocrats of the palace thought that he was a sign of bad luck to come. Indeed, Marie Antoinette supposedly saw his ghost shortly before meeting the guillotine herself. Napoleon, it was said, quite liked him and would talk to him about war strategy. Of course. Those visiting the old palace today occasionally do spot the man in red, which is a bad thing indeed because it's supposed to be that, you know, he's a sign of bad things to come. Coming into number 6, we have the Witches of Musham Castle. Unternburg, Austria held its own gruesome witch trials between 1675 and 1690. These were the Zuberjackal trials, during which 139 people were killed. Now, strangely for witch trials, most of those killed were men, 113 men to be precise. Those killed on suspicion of witchcraft were tortured first, and then afterwards they were burned alive, or hung, or decapitated. As you can imagine, as the scene of hundreds of brutal and unjust murders, the building carries a certain tension. And you can feel that tension even if you don't believe in ghosts, but if you do, it is thought that the spirits of the wronged plague the castle, crying and shrieking at night. One of the murdered was a 10-year-old orphan who was killed simply for being homeless. His cries are said to be the loudest. Beyond the story of the witch trials, there is a tale of werewolves in the palace. Now, these stem back to the 1800s. Back then, deer and cattle began showing up dead around the grounds. Suspected werewolves were taken to the dungeon and killed. Some say they hear the growls of torture victims emanating from the dungeons at night even today. Coming in at number 5, we have Frankenstein's Castle. You may recognize the name Frankenstein. Well, it is thought that this castle inspired Mary Shelley's famous novel of the same name. The castle is in the Darmstadt district of Germany, in the Hesse region. The 13th century castle is thought to be haunted by the ghost of Johann Conrad Dippel, a bad man. Dippel was a physician and alchemist who wanted to resurrect the dead. He would rob graves by night and then cut up the bodies and use them in his elixirs and potions. It seems that he wanted to find a potion to resurrect the dead and also to generate immortality. In the end, drinking one of his concoctions actually killed him. It is thought that his spirits haunts the Frankenstein castle today, and so too do the many spirits of his unearthed experiments. He is most frequently spotted between Christmas and New Year sitting on the chapel roof. Coming in at number 4, we have the hellish Hoska Castle in the Czech Republic. Hoska Castle is a Gothic fort in the middle of nowhere, and it is said that even to this day, animals stay away from the castle walls. They prefer to be out in the wild rather than take shelter in the structure. In folklore, the castle is known as the gateway to hell. Legend has it that demons and dragons have been spotted pouring forth from the castle's vile mouth. Indeed, some even say that they've seen ghouls there today. To make matters worse, the castle was taken over by the Nazis during World War II. It is said that they tortured hundreds of people there, as well as conducting some really inhumane medical tests. Some think that the Nazis were drawn to the building as it was so hellish, others say it was simply a coincidence. Most do agree, however, that the property is haunted and only a few brave souls will step inside. Those that have claim that they have constantly felt like they're being watched. Coming in at number 3, we have Dracula's Castle. Dracula. No. So Bran's Castle, better known as Dracula's Castle, is a stately 13th century castle linked to the dark legend of Dracula because of its Transylvania location, or modern day Romania. Though famous literary vampire aside, the castle was once home to the extra ghoulish Vlad the Impaler, thought to be one of the worst and most evil tyrants to ever live. Vlad the Impaler was alive until 1477, and in his 50-ish years on Earth, he caused literal hell. Many suspected that he himself was a vampire because of the ghoulish way that he would kill people. It is a popular legend that the vampire, or indeed the ghost of Vlad, haunt the castle today. Honestly, how terrifying. Coming in at number 2, we have Fyvie Castle in Scotland. I love Scotland. You will find plenty of ghost stories in Scotland, especially in Scottish castles. A little north of Aberdeen, you will find the breathtaking Fyvie Castle. Fyvie is haunted by the ghost of poor Lilias Drummond, who died of both an empty stomach and an empty heart. It seems that she had an abusive husband who would beat her, and in the end it is said that he locked her in a room and starved her to death in 1601. It seems that Lilias's ghost has haunted the castle ever since, and strangely appears as a green spectre. The night her husband took a new wife, she carved her name in the stone wall of her husband's bedchamber. Apparently this carving can still be seen there today. It seems that her spirit shows up when bad things are about to happen to the castle's owners or to the area surrounding the castle. Now, aside from her mournful spirit, it is also said that the castle is haunted by a trumpeter whose instrument can be heard when death is nearby. Usually I'm like, bring on the trumpets, but not when they signal death. Finally, coming into number 1 of the scariest, most haunted castles in the world, we have Leap Castle in Ireland. Leap Castle is often hailed as one of the most haunted castles in the entire world. The castle in County Offaly dates back to the 1200s and today is in partial ruin. The castle was owned by the O'Carrolls clan, but it was under constant siege. On one occasion, a priest was killed in a brawl between warring clans. Now sadly, his death took place in what is now known as the Bloody Chapel. The priest is said to haunt the chapel today and is pretty unhappy about his death, which, you know, fair. The story of the priest is one of the more notable deaths, but plenty of blood has been shed in the castle at the hands of the attackers and the O'Carrolls. The O'Carrolls were said to have been brutish back in the day, and they were thought to have captured and raped a woman who fell pregnant. When the woman birthed her child, unfortunately, the infant was killed by her captors. It is said that now her angry spirit haunts the castle, wielding a knife ready to stab in a fit of revenge. The worst spirit of all, though, is the spirit of something that locals call it. It is around the size of a sheep and is an unidentified animal, and it has a decaying face. Before you even see it, you will smell it. It comes with a waft of rotting flesh and sulfur, which, ugh. Ghosts, one thing. Ghosts that smell, a whole different ballgame.
At number 10, we have Salem, Massachusetts, USA. A town revered by the occult and has a dark enough history to make any horror fan squeal with glee. Salem, Massachusetts was the home of the 1692 Salem witch trials. This is where a massive witch hunt led to the hanging of 19 people who were falsely accused of using witchcraft. There are several spots around the town that give off an extremely creepy vibe and have reported hauntings, but the most notorious place is the former home of Sheriff George Corwin. He was the man responsible for spearheading the hunting and capturing of these witches. Not only that, but the people that were captured, he would take them into his basement and then he would torture these people until they confessed to their crimes. Now his ghost and the ghosts of several other people who were tortured by him haunt the Joshua Ward House, which is the building that sits on the land that the sheriff's house used to be on. At number 9, we have the Fairmont Hotel in Banff, Canada. If you have never been to Banff, it is one of the most beautiful places in the whole world. There's amazing skiing in the winter, and in the summer it turns into a lush green wonderland. If you were a ghost, this would be a paradise to haunt. The Fairmont sits on top of a mountain that looks so regal it could double as the Grand Budapest Hotel. It was built in 1888 and it was the center point to increase tourism in the area, and it worked. But like any old building, this place has adopted some guests that refuse to check out. There are 2 ghosts that are responsible for the majority of the ghost sightings, one being that of an old bellhop. He was the employee of the hotel back in the 70s, and after he kicked the bucket, he decided that retirement wasn't for him. His ghost has been been seen throughout the hotel helping people to this day. Very few people get to do what they love. Why let a little thing like death stop you from sticking to your passion? Another ghost is that of the bride dressed all in white. The story goes that she tripped down a staircase on the day of her wedding and met a grim ending. That is a huge bummer. You're about to make it to the altar and you lose your footing. Oh, that sucks. At number 8 we have the Chinoi Church in Beijing, China. An old mysterious building that sits in Beijing, China. There are several elements to this building that make it an intriguing place for anyone interested in the supernatural. First, no one knows who built the building or who commissioned the building to be built, almost as if an outside force created the building, like the devil came to town and was like, yeah, let's build a church. Also, on the front door of the building there is a note that makes it very clear that there are no ghosts inside, which is super sus. Like where I live, there's no note about ghosts because it's just a given. We know there's no ghosts. This place uses the used car salesman approach to convincing people. Yeah, that rickety noise in the back? Oh, that's just something the car makes. It's an added feature. The residence is haunted by the ghost of a young woman who killed herself by hanging during the Communist War in China. Some say she did this because her husband was killed at war, and others say she was trying to avoid capture. At number 7 we have the Shanghai Tunnels in Portland, USA. A Shanghai tunnel sounds like a place where you go to bet on horse racing and eat the best fried rice you've ever had in your life. But it actually used to be the epicenter for human trafficking in the United States. Located in Portland, Oregon, the tunnels are now run down and unused. Back in the 19th century, people walking through these tunnels would often be kidnapped and then sold overseas into slave labor. Some bars above these tunnels had trap doors in them, which they would use to take drunk people, slip them down into the tunnels where they would never be seen again. A lot of people died in these tunnels before they were sold off into slavery. Now it's said that their angry ghosts walk the halls. Screaming, banging, and even weeping can be heard when you pass through these tunnels. At number 6 we have La Château de Brissac, France. We are heading all over the world with this list, and now we're heading to a place that has a long, rich history, France. It makes sense to waltz right into a castle. Besides being one of the most glorious buildings in all of France, an exciting reason to visit this place is the spectral tourist attraction. Back during the reign of King Charles VII, he was married to a beautiful woman who he unfortunately found out was cheating on him. He wasn't too happy with this, so he divorced her, and that was that. I'm just kidding. It was the 1400s. He also had her killed for insulting his honor. That's how they did things back then. When her life ended, she was wearing a green dress. Now it's said you can see the ghost of a woman in a green dress walking the halls, moaning for her lost love. At number 5 we have Morgan House, Kalimpong, India. The estate formerly owned by the Morgans has a rather dark past. The house was lived in by Baron George Morgan and his wife back in the 1930s. Apparently Mr. Morgan would spend a lot of his free time torturing his wife. With them being in India and his wife having nowhere to go, she eventually fell into a depression. Not long after that she died. The two never had any kids, and after Mr. Morgan died, the Indian government took control of the property. It has now been spruced up into a nice hotel, but the terrors of this building's past haven't been washed away. Mrs. Morgan is free from her husband and has no interest in leaving her home. Many patrons of the hotel say they have heard her high heels walking along the wooden floors. At number 4 we have Casa Loma, Toronto, Canada. The most famously haunted place in all of Toronto. It's literally a massive castle that is a 10-minute drive from the world famous CN Tower. It's strange having a massive stone castle built in the early 20th century so close to the downtown core, but that's probably why it's so haunted. All the ghosts want to gather there because it feels like home. One of the most haunted areas of the castle are the secret underground tunnels which connect different sections of the property. There have been reports of a ghostly miner who might have died digging the tunnels and a lady in a white dress. Also, the castle's former owner, Lady Mary Pellet, has been seen all throughout the building. Some people say they've tried to take a picture of her when she's walking through, and she will use her ghostly powers to turn off your camera. Sounds like she's not very photogenic. If you want to give yourself an extra fright, you should come check out the castle in October when they turn the whole thing into a massive haunted house. I've been, it's a great time. At number 3 we have the Hill of Crosses in Lithuania. The look of this place will make you say, oh yeah, there are for sure some ghosts in here. This hill has been the site of rebellion, respect, and remembering the dead for the past 500 years. People have come here to place crosses as a way to pay good fortune to those who died fighting for the freedom of Lithuania. This practice has made it a safe haven for spirits to walk through, and there have been reports of seances performed there trying to contact these dead heroes. There are currently over 100,000 crosses piled up on this hill. Back in the Soviet reign, they tried to destroy this holy landmark 3 times. Three times. But the Lithuanian people stood strong and came back to rebuild it every time. That's a pretty awesome story of solidarity. I know why ghosts want to hang out here. They're like, I know my home will be safe forever. At number 2, we have Cemetery Number 1 in New Orleans, USA. This place has been nicknamed the Haunted City because it is literally filled with so many graves that you could fill a small theater. There are over 700 graves at this site. You pack that many people into one spot and you are guaranteed some strange spirits walking around. On Halloween, it must be like a massive party in there. It would be a giant ghost rave with the coolest people from the last 200 years. The grave that gets the most attention is that of former voodoo priestess Marie Laveau. It's said she had the power to influence spirits, and now even in death her ghost can gain strength from the graveyard and get the phantoms to do her bidding. I mean, that's a good skill to have after you're dead. You're like, oh, you guys, you work for me. That's how this is gonna work. And for the number 1 spot, we have the Rose Hall in Montego Bay, Jamaica. A beautiful mansion that used to be the home of the Palmers back in the 19th century. The two were a loving couple, or that's what the public thought. Mr. Palmer died one day of suspicious causes, but foul play was inconclusive. Annie Palmer took control of the property, and people weren't too suspicious until her 2 following husbands and her parents died, all without warning. Now things are getting a little suspicious. The urban legend of Annie Palmer is that she was a witch and she would use dark magic to kill her victims. It's said that her evil spirit still inhabits the Rose Hall. A witch ghost sounds pretty serious, especially one that has killed people. That's not something you want to disturb for your own entertainment, right? Well, you totally can. You can take tours of the building which highlight all the legends surrounding the witch of the Rose Hall. And if you really want to bring some bad mojo into your life, you can take part in a seance to communicate with the spirit of Annie Palmer. I think the ghost of a murderous witch isn't something I would want to hang out with.
Starting us off at number 10 are satanic symbols. Back in 2013, a couple named Janine and AJ moved into a quaint and sweet little house in Springfield, Louisiana. They were so excited to get the house and were amazed at the cheap price. But soon after they moved in, it quickly became apparent as to why the price may have been so low. Things started off small, as it usually does, with their radio turning on all by itself or seeing the lights flicker independently, but soon enough they overheard their son speaking to who he described as an imaginary friend late at night, and they heard a strange voice threaten to begin hurting Janine. Before long, Janine was being assaulted by the unseen presence, waking up to find bruises and scratches, and would often get pushed around by the demon in the middle of the day. She began noticing that the rosaries she hung were spinning in the house, plaster was falling from the ceiling and missing her by mere inches, and she began to seriously fear for her life. One day, her and her husband decided to leave out a tape recorder to see if they could get any proof of the demon occupying their house, and sure enough, when they went to check up on it the next day, they captured a growling sound and the demon saying, "She will die." But the last straw was when they moved a rug in one of the rooms, only to discover that the floor had been covered entirely in satanic symbols. This led them to believe that once upon a time the house had been used by a satanic cult that had likely brought the horrific demon that was taunting them into our world. Needless to say, they packed up everything and got the out of there. Next up at number 9 is Sarah Winchester's mansion. As the story goes, in 1881, Sarah lost her husband to tuberculosis, and in her grief sought out a spiritualist in hopes they could help her contact her husband to help her overcome this tragedy. But instead of getting the solace and closure she was looking for, she received an ominous warning that sent her off the deep end. You see, her late husband's family had created the notorious Winchester rifle that became known as the gun that won the West. What that meant was that thousands thousands had died due to this creation of the gun, so when they reached her late husband in the beyond, he warned Sarah that all their lives' tragedies were a result of the blood money earned from the evil weapon. Next, he explained that spirits were coming after her with a vengeance and she needed to build a home for herself to protect against them. But there was one catch. She could never stop building. If she stopped construction, she would die. Sarah took this omen incredibly seriously and began construction on her property immediately, turning her house into a topsy-turvy maze-like mansion, believing it would confuse any spirits who tried to enter and torture her. There are staircases that lead to nowhere, trapdoors, skylights on the floor, doors that open to walls, and even a door that opens to a second-story drop. With all that, it's said that ghosts really did get trapped inside and now, unable to leave, get madder and madder with each passing day. Many have reported seeing apparitions, voices, and footsteps while visiting. Next up at number 8 is a demon mirror. It's not just homes that demons can allegedly occupy, but they're also a big fan of inanimate objects. In this case, a mirror. According to London roommates Joseph and Sotiris, they scored a free antique mirror from their landlord a few years ago. The friends were young and didn't have much money, so they were just happy to get a free piece of furniture. But after bringing it into their home, strange things started happening, and they soon discovered it had to be connected to the new mirror. The roommates began suffering intense and lucid nightmares and would wake up with brutal stabbing pains all over their body, along with scratch marks. Not only that, they would frequently wake up to find their entire house was practically turned upside down in a complete pigsty, almost as if they had been robbed. Soon enough, they were seeing shadowy figures lurking in the corners of their house and saw glimpses of darkness in the mirror, along with orbs of light appearing out of nowhere in the room. Eventually, they decided to get rid of the mirror, and they landed on selling it on eBay with plenty of warning about what to expect. I have to say, I am worried for whoever bought it from them. If it were me, I would have just destroyed it. Next up at number 7 is a Ouija board. I don't know who decided to let Ouija boards become such an easily accessible item available to purchase at Walmart, because I don't think I have ever heard of it going well for anyone. One of these such stories is that of Tracy and Kieran Fry from South Wales. They became huge names in the British tabloids back in 2015 after they claimed that beginning on Halloween night, 3 incubus demons made their way into their home and began terrorizing them both physically and mentally every night for months. But they really got afraid after their son reported the demon visiting him, threatening to slit both Tracy and Kieran's throats in their sleep. And not long after that, they claimed to have witnessed the apparition in the light of day and even snapped a picture of the demon for the paper. The couple believed that the evil spirits managed to use their Ouija board as a vehicle to infest their home, which they had apparently used previously in an attempt to contact the dead. Eventually, the torture got so bad that they contacted a paranormal investigator as well as a vicar to try and rid the demons of their home, but allegedly only 2 of the entities were able to be squashed, and according to the couple, the demon never actually left and continues to haunt them to this day. Coming in at number 6 is Deanna Simpson. After years of being haunted by several demonic entities in her home, Deanna decided to reach out to reporters to share her story. Although the details have never been confirmed, Deanna claims that the origin of the demons in her home come from a series of gruesome deaths that occurred on the property, and she believes that the spirits are angry and unable to move on from their deaths. Eventually, things got so bad that in 2014, a film crew from Fox 43 arrived to see for themselves if the rumors were true, and what they saw changed their lives forever. As soon as they entered, they knew that Deanna had been telling the truth about the entities in her home. One of the cameramen, Nick Petrillo, said he felt burning all over his hands whenever he tried filming inside the house, and the only thing that made it go away was the holy water that Deanna poured over the area. While the crew was there, she went into more detail about her experience with the demons, explaining she believed it was multiple evil spirits haunting her, and that over the years they frequently tortured both her and her husband, physically and mentally, and she was beginning to lose hope about a better life. Deanna Deanna claims that she captured the shadowy figures on film, although this has never been confirmed. Still, the camera crew seemed to be quite on board with her experience. Coming in at number 5 is The Cage. During the witch trial era of Essex, this house was used as a prison for women accused of such sinful acts. During the 16th century, it housed 12 accused witches, one of which was the famous Ursula Kemp, who was tragically hanged for her so-called witchy ways. Whether that is all a coincidence or not is up for debate, but according to the 2004 owner, Vanessa Mitchell, it is a terrifying haunted home filled with deep-seated evil. The demons wasted no time introducing themselves to Vanessa. She claims that the first night in the house, she saw a shadowy figure in the corner and knew right away that something was very, very wrong. Shortly after, she began to feel harassed by the entity, as it would do things like push her when she was home alone, smack her hard enough to leave bruises, and even shoved Vanessa down the stairs. Not only that, she began seeing strange things. Blood stains started showing up on her floors all the time, and objects began launching themselves across the room. Whatever it was, it did not want her there. In an interview, she states that during her 3-year time living in the cage, she witnessed 4 ghosts, 2 men and 1 woman, as well as a horrifying goat demon, which she claims to have captured on camera. Thankfully, she got out alive, but the house remains a notorious spot in Essex, frequented by paranormal enthusiasts hoping to catch a glimpse of the evil entity that nearly killed Vanessa. Next up at number 4 is the Smurl House. Between the years of 1974 to 1989, the Smurl family was subjected to some incredibly terrifying hauntings in their Pennsylvania home. Over the 15 years they lived here, Jack and Janet Smurl, along with the rest of the family members, reported that their TV burst into flames, their toilets would flush themselves, and that various electronics would stop working for no reason at all. But it was at night that the family got truly terrified. They would hear the loud footsteps despite there never being an intruder, and a nauseating smell always filled the house, but only ever at night. Soon enough, things got even scarier. They began finding what appeared to be claw marks all over the bathroom, and then in 1985, a full-bodied apparition began haunting the halls and hovering over them while they were sleeping. The family named her Old Hag, and it seems that after a while the demon got bored of just watching the couple sleep, so it began harassing them, and according to Janet, would routinely commit SA on both her and her husband. That was the final straw for the couple, and so they decided to bring in a priest to exorcise the demon out, but even after 50 exorcisms, the entity refused to tighten its grip. So, fearing for their lives, the family finally moved out in 1989 and never looked back. Next up at number 3 is LaToya Ammons. When LaToya Ammons moved into her quaint home in Gary, Indiana in 2011, she had no clue what was in store for her and her family. According to LaToya, things got bad quickly. The first troubling phenomenon occurred when a huge swarm of large black flies started circling the family's screened-in porch and only seemed to be multiplying. These flies were relentless, even staying through the winter, and as soon as they arrived, so did the sounds of strange footsteps at night. Then one day LaToya saw a shadowy figure walk across her living room, and she began to panic. Something evil was in her home. It all came to a head after LaToya witnessed her unconscious 12-year-old levitating above her bed at 2 a.m. So she contacted some clairvoyants to try and rid whatever evil spirit was living in the home. According to the paranormal experts, LaToya's home was haunted by an astonishing 200 demons, and was indeed a very dangerous place for her and her family to be living. LaToya decided the best course of action was to undergo exorcisms to rid themselves of anything the demons could have placed on them and flee their home. All I can say is thank God they got out alive. Coming in at number 2 is the Sally House. Built in the 19th century, this haunted Kansas home is named after the ghost that is believed to roam its halls. The haunted house came into light back in 1992 when owners Tony and Deborah Pickman came forward saying that they began experiencing very strange things in their home after the birth of their daughter. What was once a completely normal home was suddenly family infested by a demonic entity, covering the couple in scratch marks, cuts, and bruises nearly every day, and anyone else who visited the house received the same treatment. Soon, things only got worse. They were seeing full apparitions of the demons, watching objects float around their house, and hearing strange demonic noises at all hours of the day. It got so bad they contacted investigators who attempted to reach the spirits and reason with them, but the investigators were similarly tortured by whatever it was that was in their home. Eventually they came to realize that Sally, the house's most active ghost, had died here when she was young from a botched appendectomy, and despite what they initially thought of her, she was not the demon herself. Instead, she had somehow become a magnet for dark entities to pass through, almost like a portal for demons to enter their house, and it was them who was making their lives a living hell. By 1994, they had enough and moved out of the horrible house, but have since maintained a website dedicated to their experience there. And last up in our #1 spot today is Marie and Chris. Marie and Chris had a blended family, each with kids from previous marriages, and lived a very happy life. Until they decided to use a Ouija board to contact Chris's son from the dead. Quickly after beginning, they were contacted by an entity claiming to be Chris's son, but in fact, it was not his son. It was a demon masquerading as him. The demon called itself Frank and began detailing its desire to possess Julie, one of Mary's daughters who had cerebral palsy. This was enough for the couple to know that things were very wrong, and they quickly closed the board and ended the seance. But unbeknownst to them, they had opened a door they couldn't close. The family began being taunted by the entity Frank, and so Chris, thinking it would banish the spirit, decided to burn the Ouija board, but all it did was make Frank angrier and stronger. He began appearing in Mary's dreams, continuing to threaten the life of Julie, to the point where Mary was too afraid to even sleep, fearing it would only be the tortures of the demon all night. The family began seeing faces in the walls at night, waking up with scratches and bruises, and eventually decided to contact a professional. When the investigator arrived, he went to where the spirit was most active and sprinkled talc powder all over the floor there. To everyone's shock the next day, the name Julie had been scrawled into the powder on the floor. At that point, the family decided the only thing to do was to reach out to a Catholic priest for an exorcism. The priest eventually managed to banish Frank, but not before he possessed poor Julie for several hours. Moral of the story? Don't mess with Ouija boards.
Starting off at #10 are Wichita Falls, Texas. And surprisingly, there are a lot of haunted towns in the state of Texas. There are a lot on this list, and I feel like they probably make the record for most haunted towns in America. But either way, Wichita Falls is filled, and I mean filled, with haunting stories. There's a site in town called the Witch's Gate that used to be a mansion before it burned down in the 70s. After the man of the house died, his wife went a bit insane, turning to things like witchcraft to try and cope. She somehow burned the mansion down, killing her 2 sons with it. Another story claims the sons were robbed, and it was the thief that set the house on fire. The boys haunt the area till this day, and I'm not surprised, I'd be pissed too. Another famous one is the White Sanitarium. Presently a private residence, it used to be a mental hospital in the 20s. After the place closed down, people have seen a group of men sitting around a table playing cards, perhaps the hospital's dead old staff, I don't know. But more famously, they've seen a woman in nurse's clothes roaming the building. There's also Pinky's Cave, which is a 3-mile drainage ditch, and kids used to hang out there years ago, but now it's filled with eerie sounds and homeless people, as well as the ghost of a woman and her child who drowned inside the tunnel during a storm. Coming in at #9 is Pluckley, Kent. Pluckley is a small village in Kent that was named the most haunted village in England by Guinness World Records in 1989. So I don't want to overhype it, but at the same time it clearly deserves the hype. It's said that 12 to 16 ghosts haunt the village and the surrounding areas. The list includes a screaming man who worked at the village brickworks and fell to his death. Another is a highwayman who was pinned to a tree with a sword. That tree was soon named Fright Corner, and that's where his ghost looms every day. The watercress woman is the ghost of a woman who used to sit on a bridge drinking gin and smoking her pipe while selling watercress. You'd assume she drowned in the river she sat near, but the reality was a lot more more grim. It's said she dropped gin all over herself and accidentally set herself alight on the bridge. There's also the ghost of a principal who hung himself and was found by his students. On LV Farm, which dates back to 1406, there's the ghost of Edward Brett who shot himself in the dairy. His last words to his wife were, "I will do it," and that's what can be heard whispered around the farm. Then, of course, if we're more generic, there's the white lady and the red lady, because make no mistake, there is always a white lady ghost in every list. That's 7 ghosts already, and that's not even the end of it. Based on the deaths in the list, I get the feeling there's like an external force in the village that made people slightly suicidal. That's the vibe I'm getting, I don't really know. At number 8 we have Savannah, Georgia. Apparently it's widespread knowledge that Savannah is the most haunted city in America, and thankfully I've never been. The town was given this title because literally every building in the town is haunted, like everyone. Every building has a story, every building has its own ghost. It's like Savannah is more for the ghosts than it is for the living. The Hamilton Turner Inn is home to the ghost of a man smoking a cigar on its roof, as well as little children. Whose children are they? God knows. Dubbed one of the best haunted hotels in the US because clearly that's a real category, the Marshall House was a hotel that ended up being used as a hospital thrice in its history, and thus you can imagine all the dead patients as ghosts running around. 1790 Inn and Restaurant is the home of a scorned woman called Anna who haunts the upstairs guest rooms waiting for her lost love. But why is Savannah so haunted? Let's go back in history. The town has been the site of many atrocities. The siege of Savannah that killed 240 people left people thinking unsettled soldiers still lingered there. Savannah has also been the site of a yellow fever epidemic, so that's a lot of people dead just there. In 1820 there was a massive fire in town that destroyed 500 buildings, and there was an even bigger fire 25 years prior that destroyed half that number. The people that died in those fires have been linked to the houses they occupied. And let's not forget the countless murders that have taken place there as well. Filling our number 7 slot is Jerome, Arizona. Mining town Jerome is known as the wickedest town in the West for its brothels, gambling, and heavy drinking miners. The town itself actually burned down 3 times in 3 years at the end of the 1800s. At its peak, its population was 15,000, it then shrank to 50 people in the 50s, and currently it's 450 people. Inside the town, the Jerome Grand Hotel adds to the hauntings tenfold. Before it was a hotel, it was the United Verde Hospital where dozens of people died during the Great Spanish Influenza. Coughs, breathing, lights flicking, doors opening, a little child running on the 3rd floor either laughing or crying, it has it all. Sometimes the little ghost just stays at the foot of a guest's bed and stares at them all night. The sounds of newborn babies crying, and many guests have even spoken to the front desk about it out of concern, but then they find out it's coming from an empty room. A maintenance man named Claude Harvey was found under the elevator murdered in the 30s, and his ghost wanders around the hotel as well. There's even a ghost cat at this hotel. Can you imagine? I could go on, but I think you get the picture. Other than coming for tourism or to chase ghosts, no one really visits Jerome anymore, sadly. Now at number 6 is Helltown, Ohio. Founded in 1806 and formerly called Boston, this place used to be the oldest village in Summit County. Helltown was the victim of disappearing forest land when President Ford let the National Park jurisdiction expropriate land to make parks. The NPS started buying properties of locals in Helltown, and they were pissed. They even wrote "Now we know how the Indians felt" all over their houses, which I feel is a bit inappropriate, but either way, that was all for nothing. The plan fell through in the end and the village was abandoned. Things went wrong in 1985 when rangers visited Kredge Dump nearby and left covered in rashes and sick. Apparently the dump was highly toxic because chemicals were never disposed of properly. There's also the issue of the Satanist church, equipped with upside down crosses and all. Human and animal sacrifices even took place there, and that's not all. There was even an escaped mental patient in the woods in the town that killed a bus full of children, and that bus is still there, haunted by the ghost's murdered past. There's even a mutated snake in the town known as the Peninsula Python, so it's safe to say the town lives up to its name and has way too much going on. Coming in at number 5 is Granbury, Texas. This one's a bit of a small one. In 2010 their population wasn't even 8,000, so I mean it's an intimate little town. But regardless of that, it's been the home home for many infamous people over the years. Davy Crockett's wife Elizabeth moved there post the Texas Revolution, and Jesse James is even buried in the city of Granbury Cemetery. Billy the Kid apparently moved there too after faking his own death. But the biggest haunted appeal of Granbury is John St. Helen. He moved there in the 1870s to teach and would quote Shakespeare all the time. But people think John St. Helen was actually John Wilkes Booth, the man who assassinated Abraham Lincoln. Apparently he died in a bar fire and police threw Booth's body into the Potomac River. Others say he was assigned a new identity after the assassination. I mean, in town he walked with a strange limp and had a southern accent, so people were wary of him. On his deathbed he did confess to a priest that he was in fact John Wilkes Booth and told him where he could find the gun that killed Abe. But he didn't die that day. He fled the city, but it's said that when he did finally die wherever that was, he came back to Granbury. The Granbury Opera House is haunted by him now, and you can hear him quoting Shakespeare all the time. Some things never change. At number 4 is Galveston, Texas. This island city's residents are so used to seeing ghosts around that honestly, they don't even bat an eyelid anymore. During the early 1900s, the city opened the Galvez Hotel to honor military leader Bernardo de Galvez, and they commissioned a giant portrait of him to go in its lobby. Soon after the Galvez Hotel opened its doors, guests started complaining this painting would make them feel extremely cold and that his eyes would just follow them everywhere. The hotel is also haunted by a ghost bride who's been seen many times in room 501. It's said she hung herself after finding out her fiance died at sea, but to make matters worse, he didn't even die. He came to the hotel looking for her and for the marriage that would never be. There was also a storm in 1900, which is still considered the deadliest storm in US history that killed 8,000 residents. Mayfield Manor served as a morgue after the storm, and it's now haunted all year round, 24/7, around the clock. Dash Beardsley does ghost tours of the city, and he said he's seen them with his own eyes. Among his many stories is one of an office in town that calls 911 every night. The police have gone there countless times to find the office empty and no telephone even connected. Another story is the ghost of a salesman who died